It's the Eid holiday, another beautiful day to be alive. Wherever you are, if you find yourself alive and kicking and watching me, thank God for that. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. It always is a pleasure hosting you. I do this together with Bernice Abubedu Lanza. Well, coming up this morning, we shall be engaging Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abrahima. In the course of our news review, he will be our guest. But when we get into the big stories, two crucial issues we're going to be tackling. The first, that looming crisis in some senior high schools attributed to the shortage of food, with the chairman of CHAS in the Upper West region warning of a shutdown of schools by July the 15th if the trend continues. Now, what does this mean for the survival of free SHS going forward? We take you to the regions where our correspondents will tell us about the real situation on the ground. We'll also interact with the chairman of CHAS in the Upper West region, Magnus Innocent, in that area. Finally, we'll also be interacting on that same subject with Chairman of NAGRAT, Jacob Anaba Kofi, and we'll also be joined by Kofi Asari, who is the Executive Director for the Education Watch. Kwesi Kwarteng is PRO for the Ghana Education Service. Hopefully we get a response from them as well. But we'll also be talking about public sector wages and demands by public sector workers. Now, the union, that is the TUC, with a total of over 27,000 workers, are up in arms over government's reluctance to heed the call for a cost of living allowance, further deepening the woes of government, as 4 teacher unions have already laid down their tools and as stakeholders move into negotiations. How are things likely to unfold in the midst of an IMF bailout in respect of our economy? What are the implications on our governance and the economy broadly? Joining us for that discussion, Deputy General Secretary of the PSWU, John Sampa. We also have Labour expert Austin Game. CDD fellow Dr. Osai Kwapong also joins the conversation, but much later on the show. What does the food shortage in our senior high schools mean? What does this imply for the survival of free SHS? That's our question for you today. What are the implications of the shortage of food in our schools on free SHS? You get to have your say with the hashtag AM Show and call in when we activate the phone lines. For now, though, let's settle for the news with Pa Kwesi Shandor. Stay.
It's a Monday morning. Welcome to the AM News here on the AM Show. My name is Pa Kwesi Shandor. So, very first story, the board chairman of the Public Procurement Authority has mounted a defense for the authority, absolving them of any blame or a possible breach in the award of contracts under the National Cathedral project. This was after the PPA told Norton MP Samuel Okudeto Ablakwa it has no document or information about the controversial project. But speaking in an interview with Joy News, Professor Ameya Okunfi said while the processes could be corrected, he's against the rectification of flawed procurement processes.
I'm not worried, because myself and my team are working with the rules. We have the Act. I'm not a procurement specialist, but at least I understand the English in the Act. And I advise all of them that if we work with the rules, we will run into difficulties.
But is it surprising that for a national project like the National Cathedral, the PPA has no information on that, or at least per what we know now, it didn't go through the processes of the PPA, it didn't go through the institution? Is that surprising?
Failure of an entity to go through the procurement process leaves that entity with a risk of some sort of auditing measures and sanctions. So if you don't come to us, we are not going to ask you to come to us. Auditors will find you out, and then normally a request will put in for ratification. I am frowning upon ratification. You do the wrong thing, and then you come to us for ratification.
Yeah.
So if PPA tells you they know little or nothing about a project, you have to understand them. If indeed they weren't approached to the regular application, then of course they won't have any information on that.
So you would support the calls for, you know, a thorough investigation into this?
I will not support any entity that goes through procurement without going through the right motions.
We live in a country where statistical computations are not contested. That's the response from a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, Professor Ransford Jampo, to the president, who has announced a 30% cut down on salaries amidst the harsh economic conditions. Professor Jampo adds that unless Labour has access to the pay slips of politicians, the mere announcement of a 30% salary reduction is just propaganda. We'll hear from Professor Ransford Jampo shortly, but first, let's listen to President Akakpo urging Ghanaians to make the relevant sacrifices as the country navigates out of the current economic difficulties.
We are all going to have to make some sacrifices to afford us the space to navigate the troubled waters of the current economic difficulties. In the case of government, discretionary expenditures of ministries, departments, and agencies have been cut by 30%. The salaries of all political appointees, including myself, have been reduced by 30%. Fuel coupon allocations have been slashed by 50%, and other expenditures suspended.
Let's now hear from Professor Ransford Jampo.
We live in a country where statistical computations and data are always controverted. And so when some people talk about percentages, it becomes a bit debatable. You know that it is in the mind of Labour that the recent Yanti Amabidu committee that spoke about emolument of the president and other Article 71 office holders did a computation that made us see that their salaries and emoluments have been up by over 70 to 79%. What shows that we are being told the truth, that 30%, the salaries of Article 71 of office holders or salaries of the president and his appointees have been reduced by 30%. What is the proof? For me, unless we have the chance to see the pay slip of these officials, I think just telling us that salaries have been reduced by 30% is just for the cameras, because you cannot trust politicians. Were we not here when we're told that I am going to IMF was a no-go area? They told us, but they deceived us. They told us that, look, we either must pass the E-levy or we will go IMF, and the E-levy was going to be a solution that will prevent us from going to IMF. They told us this, and then they still went on. They are still they passed the E-levy, and then they are not talking IMF. And so my point is that many politicians know that Ghanaians do not bother to check some of these assertions, and so they can come out to prove to you that, look, we have reduced our salaries by 30%. The point is that unless Labour has access to the pay slip and pay slip and salary advice of these politicians, I think that telling us that your salary has been reduced by 30% is just propaganda and something that is said to just throw that into the eyes of people. Let us see if it is true. Let us compare. Let us see the salary split now and be able to do before and after, and be able to fully appreciate the fact that there's been 30%.
The Greater Accra Regional Security Council will from today pull down the billboards of all candidates vying for various portfolios in the NPP's national executive elections scheduled for this week. This follows the expiration of a 24-hour ultimatum issued by the Advertisers Association. The party's elections committee had earlier warned against the use of billboards in this contest. Here is the executive director of the Advertisers Association, Francis Daji, speaking to Joy News.
there's a process for mounting these billboards, and more often than not, from past experiences, these political activists never go through those processes. And so they begin to mount anywhere, anyhow, later the cities. And that has been of concern for us, an association, for a long time now, ever since we went to the Fourth Republic dispensation. Most people who don't obey these regulations are the political parties. So for us, it's a welcoming news that at least the party from its headquarters have seen the menace and the havoc and the littering that these billboards cause across the city. Some of them are even in position, and some of them are not mounted by our members, but mounted by friends of these candidates who are not professionals and do not even know the implications. They are using wooden planks and other things for all these things, position them in the center of the road, the medians, whereby regulation should not be there. So it's a mixture of all this. And because you can't even identify some of these things and who does them under the cover of darkness and things like that, it is important and better that we take all of them off so that the littering also of the city and the regions will be minimized. For all intents and purposes, it will be difficult to track who has and who has not got the permit. But I know all those in the wooden, this thing do not have permit, because nobody will give a permit for a wooden structure to be mounted for advertising in this country as at this 2022. But of course, so for others not to think that because of lack of education, not to think that they are being targeted unduly by the assemblies or anything of that sort, it is better everybody goes off and find other means of reaching the candidates who they know are there. Just do your targeted advertising and don't visually pollute the whole country with your political activities.
Would you provide some form of compensation for them, for those who have strictly followed the process, have mounted this according to the law and per the standards of the association, and have received monies and may be running at a loss as a result of this directive? What happens to them?
Well, yes, they have opportunity of engaging with us on the side, and then we'll see how we can help them out on these matters. So they know where to come. They can come, and we'll always listen to them and see how best we can look at compensation, if anything of that sort. We'll have that discussion. But for now, this is the directive, and it must be carried out.
Now, Ghanaian pilgrims who are undertaking the Hajj in Saudi Arabia this year have been reciting verses from the Quran to seek direction for the nation's leaders while they negotiate with the International Monetary Fund. The pilgrims believe seeking the face of God is relevant in the period of economic challenges. Over 3,000 pilgrims from Ghana joined others around the world to perform Hajj as part of the Eid al-Adha commemoration. And Anaya Ojima has more in the following report.
The government of Ghana is currently in negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for an economic bailout. The depreciating cedi, high cost of fuel, and rising prices of foodstuff are major issues affecting the cost of living. For the Ghanaian pilgrims to Mecca, praying for God's intervention in the current economic challenges is a necessity.
We pray for our nation because our nation, Ghana, is in economic crisis. We pray Allah so that our elders can do something to help the economy. What we are hearing from the other West Africa countries of Mali, Niger, Burkina, these jihadist problems, may Allah continue to protect us from these things.
Some Islamic scholars urged the Ghanaian pilgrims to continuously pray for leaders of the country in the face of economic hardship.
We will pray for the country, and we have been praying for Ghana so that we are able to overcome the challenges, and we are praying for Africa because if Ghana overcomes the challenges in the midst of other African countries, it will not be felt so much in Ghana.
And after every hardship, there is relief to the other, relief for our country, and inshallah, by Allah's grace, we come out and overcome these economic challenges, and everybody in the country continue to enjoy life.
The Hajj Board assured of its resolve to ensure the safety of all pilgrims from Ghana.
Alhamdulillah, the government has been successful. We did all we can to make sure that all non-pilgrims, especially the infiltrators, will be able to block them from actually joining our buses. Let's hope and pray that they will not be able to get into the camps. So inshallah, alhamdulillah, I'll say so far so good. We did.
Since the pilgrims started landing from Medina, alhamdulillah, we saw how the housing was been arranged, and alhamdulillah, it was one of the successful arrangements in the history, in the entire history of Hajj. As we know,
Muslims believe prayer on the day of Arafah at Mount Arafat is their best chance at salvation and spiritual renewal.
Prices of religious sacrificial animals have soared during this year's Eid-al-Adha festivities, forcing many potential buyers to return home empty-handed. The increase in the prices of petroleum products and the devaluation of the cedi against the CFA are believed to be the reasons behind the price hike, according to some buyers and sellers. Now, my colleague Anazabeth visited the Techiman sheep and goat markets, where traders are lamenting poor sales.
It's yet another year again, and we are here at the Techiman Sheep and Goat Market, where we are engaging both sellers and buyers about the cost of these animals Muslims usually use for sacrificial purposes annually. So let's get interactive with this group of people here.
Actually, the market is very dull due to no money in the system. So the animals, they don't buy them as regularly. Every year they buy.
The market is there, wallahi, I say Allah. The market is last bomb. You don't know how the market is going. It's not good crowd. Because they didn't buy cattle. Look at them. The cattle are here, they don't buy it. We are suffering.
Masa fi salagai. Ya buy more ya de mo buy. To mu gina hwani. Ena me kan mi nwan kora mi enu gina so wa ko hu omo a. Cho mo camera kora na wode nama. Obi abi say yes, gyan ni.
We inquired from these traders what they think in their personal views are some of the reasons contributing to the low sales of their animals this year.
This year, the scanning is Kasem. Nanti kuraba no mbo nanti kuma say bo chirewa. Masa. And ne bo anya din o, but o mo nto. Pada ase.
Anya ne bo den nti, botom no na mo nyedu. Fi say ono ope enso enye botomuno se obenye botomuno atua nti wo ba kura otimi bahwa bia oba kura opekase obahu na wakofa de wo mo na chikura no no de ko
kaya sun shada mutan suka zo suna complain ba kudi lokacin kayan da gasuna kana kallo su gasuna sun cika da rufan da kamata yanzu ka yau jimma last market da kamata ka zo ka iska raguna biyu ko uku ne.
Whilst a couple of them are attributing the harsh economic conditions across the country, some say the exchange rate for the CFA is also to blame for the increasing cost of these animals here in the market.
We go outside to bring them, and we buy some in CFA. So when you want to convert the CFA into cedis, our money is very, very low, because first, when we're traveling, you get 1 million CFA, about 70 million, that's 7,000. But now 1 million CFA is 100 million, 130 million.
Said ya yoko fano no, once no one sika no, who se san wo ho, who the sika no ko na wo se san na wo to abona, na bo no so asesa, na bo na kosoro.
Others are also of the view that the high cost of fuel prices is contributing immensely to the rise in the cost of these animals.
The drivers are complaining about the fuel. So if we go and buy the cow crowd, the expense is too high. John time, the price was the one cattle price from Gupe to the Chima is 50 cedis. But now, 120 Ghana cedis.
Kudin lori ya shada saboda shi in ka te to daga kawo kaya ko kauye ka te kudin lorin zaka shi ka te da na lasiya ba daya bane to su kudin lorin na cikin musamman petrol kasan petrol an daga kare ne komai zai haune.
A couple of the people who are here purposely to buy sheep are settling for goats because the prices of the sheep, according to them, is extremely high. Atafuseni is one of them.
Yaba marketing, the name of wedding by this time on Ghana. Oh, say, never be a cosoro. And Tiama, Ghana and Kayaba Trojan by Esa Hono. No wedding. Until to a point no one from Kakara.
Unlike Atafuseni and a host of others who complained of high cost of these animals, Alhaji Hamma feels the animals are affordable compared to same period last year.
Oh, bueno de yema media, ba unti ka say yema obia because unim de obi bottom. Me kura me say one kura mu bonya din yo kura say last year. Yeah, because last year kura no mu boy din mo. Yo we dey menim dey ase omun to say sen mu bonya din sa.
So to these people who are here for the last market ahead of the Eid, they are hopeful that by the close of the day, they will have buyers buying from them so they do not run at loss. This has been the situation from the Techiman Sheep and Goat Market. For Joy News, my name is Anas Sabit, reporting.
Thanks for your company. This is where we wrap up on the news. My name is Pakwesi Shandov. Do have a pleasant holiday, and I leave you now in the hands of Benjamin Akakpo.
Thank you for staying with us. It's the Eid edition of the AM show, and we're glad to be here with you. Wherever you're watching us, tell a friend to tell a friend. It's going down here on the AM show. Time now for the news review. It's a scanty morning by way of the newspapers, as you would expect, because it's a holiday. So even the papers that have come out are on a bit of a diet. Yeah, the papers are dieting, as you can see. But we have a lot of content that we're going to be discussing with you on on our social media platforms as well. As and when we're joined by Suleimana Brima, who is our guest. Okay, so I'm told Suleimana is here with us. Happy Eid holiday to you, Eid al-Adha, Suleimana Brima. Can you hear me, Sule? Can you hear me, Sule?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can. I was just saying happy holiday to you, and thank you for joining the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me, and happy holiday to each and everyone, and wishing all of us the very best.
Great. I love the fact that you're in white this morning. But let's start talking about the Eid and related matters. How have you found the celebration of the Eid this year? Okay, so we have a bit of a temporary glitch with
the normal. There was consensus on. I
can hear you now. I can hear you now.
I think the connection this morning is terrible, and I was making the point that it's a normal festive occasion. Fortunately, this year there was consensus within the Muslim fraternity on when we should have the Eid celebration, which was on Saturday, and it was marked peacefully. I listened to the president's speech on the occasion, and fortunately all went well. So I guess we all prayed for our country. We know we are in crisis economically, socially, and all of that. And so we just wish ourselves well and wish our country well.
Very good point. But I also wanted to quickly, have you give us your thoughts on the Hajj, because tied to the Eid is the Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage, crucial to the life of every Muslim. And it appears every year there are issues. This year we heard of issues of people's passports supposedly disappearing and favoritism here and there, and a whole host of matters. It's about the highest bidder getting this or that. That casts a bit of a slur on the entire process. Here we are in another year, and we're witnessing same. How do we sanitize the Hajj issue?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of work to be done. in terms of the coordination, in terms of the arrangements and all of that. This year's, as far as my information is concerned, was a peculiar situation because you had people who had paid for Hajj in 2019 and for reasons of COVID could not make it.
Right.
And so this presented the first opportunity post-COVID for them to embark on the pilgrimage. And I'm told there were about 2,000 people who had paid. Then again, because of COVID, the Saudi authorities had also cut down the number of allocations for each country. And I'm told that in Ghana, it was about 3,000 or 3,050 or so.
Right.
And so what it means is that you had a backlog of 2,000, and then you also had a cut. Because previously, I think we were doing around 6,000 thereabouts. So that's about half of what we used to do. But given that we knew that this could be the situation, the Hajj managers, the board, ought to have perhaps made some very proactive arrangements to ensure that at least those who had paid, the 2,000 that paid in 2019, would have been secured their travel. And then given that you have fewer numbers to deal with, then you could have planned in such a way that you don't give a lot of people assurances and a lot of people having hope, and then also ending up collecting a lot of money from people and disappointing them. So again, it's quite a disappointment, but I hope that they improve as they go along.
Well, interesting perspectives there. I think it's only fitting now that we jump into the papers now. And I'll start with the Daily Graphic newspaper. Restore services, President appeals to teachers. I'm sure you followed the back and forth between the teachers asking for COLA and our government. Let's get some details from the story. Now, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has added his voice to the call for teachers who are on strike to return to the classrooms while negotiations continue on their demand for the payment of cost of living allowance. They call it COLA for short. Addressing the National Eid al-Adha prayers at the Black Star Square in Accra last Saturday, the president asked the teachers to take into consideration the education of students, especially those preparing to write or sit their final examination, and call off the strike so that their education would not be negatively affected. In his words, quoting him, "My fellow Ghanaians, we are all going to have to make some sacrifices to afford us the space to navigate the troubled waters of the current economic difficulties. Discretionary expenditures of ministries and agencies have been cut by 30%. The salaries of all political appointees, including myself, have been reduced by 30%. Fuel allocation has been slashed by 50%, the president said. And all of these weave into what the teachers have been, calling for, cost of living allowance. And as most economists say, rightly so, Suleimana, because guess what? These fluctuations in terms of inflation, in terms of the currency shortfalls or depreciation and all of that have really affected the standard of living. Today we'll be discussing the PSWU and how it feels on the back of government saying that, look, we'll start negotiations, yes, but the reality is that you know what time it is, and we all have to tighten our belts. Mr. President saying here, we are tightening our belt as well. Your reaction?
Well, first, Ben, I should say that I am a professional teacher. I did a professional teacher training, taught professionally for 4 years before getting into the field of journalism. So I'm always passionate about the field of teaching. And I know that teachers are perhaps one of the worst remunerated category of workers in our country. And so I really, really sympathize with them. And I know that they are going through quite a lot. Now, I also do appreciate the comments made by the president in terms of the times that we are in. And therefore, every individual, every citizen needing to sacrifice under the circumstances. However, I hold a view that the attitude of this government, the attitude of the president over the period, hasn't demonstrated that sacrifice that he once all of us to make.
He's talking about discretionary expenditures of ministries and agencies which have been cut by 30%. He's talking about fuel, dispensing, which has been cut by 50%, and all of that. And he's not been left out himself. He's been hit by the 30% reduction.
Look, Ben, I have always said that when it comes to this whole conversation about the president saying that my salary has been cut and so on and so forth, for some of us, it appears that it is a statement to make us feel as if we don't know how this country is run, as if we are people who don't really have discerning minds and so on. I mean, why would the president be talking about his salary? Which president in our republic has really depended on their salary? If the president wants, he should tell all ministers that from now on, ministers are not going to be paid a monthly salary. And let's see which minister will resign. Which minister is there because of their salary? We all know the deals they make. We all know the inflated contracts they have. I mean, how many ministers or how many government appointees are using their salaries to build all the buildings they are putting around us and all the kinds of things that they have around? Like I've said, the president can say that they've cut their salaries by 99%. And let's find out if any minister will resign because now they have a bad job. No one will resign. In fact, I'm sure that even if it turns out that, look, every month, every minister has to contribute a certain amount of money with that salary, they will still hold on to their positions. So if the president talk about my salary has been reduced by 30%, sometimes it makes it feel as if he thinks we don't have, we don't have discerning minds.
Is that Suleimana, do you find that insensitive? Because some have also said, look, and they draw the exact conclusion that you are drawing. They say, look at what you as Article 71 holders get, and look at what over the last few years, public sector workers, what are the increments? 4%, 7%. What are the increments that Article 71 office holders have been getting? And again, what is the quantum of salary? You get it. So a lot are crying out that when you say we should tighten our belts, it looks like a monkey tightening its belt versus a whale trying to tighten its belt. There are disparities.
Ben, the reality is that he talks about fuel allocation to ministers and other appointees have been reduced by 50%. Does the teacher have any fuel allocation? So why allocate fuel under these current circumstances to people who are earning far more than a teacher is earning or a nurse is earning? So if you talk about a 50% reduction of fuel allocation, how much were they getting in the first place? So if a minister was getting the equivalent of about 4,000 or 3,000 Ghana cedis as fuel every month, and you say you've reduced it by 50%, that is 1,500 allocation. That is the salary of a teacher. That is the salary of some teachers and some nurses and so on. Then you talk about discretionary expenditure having been reduced by 30%. What it means is that they still have some money that they can play with. We're talking about discretionary expenditure. If the president wants us to take him serious on this issue of mitigation measures, we can run this country by not more than 40 to 50 ministers. That is what we want to see. President Ouattara reduced his cabinet to 30 ministers because he thought the economy required saving.
I think I've seen one of our independent, presidential aspirants in the past say that he would require just about 20 ministers. And, sometimes it boggles even my mind. It gets me thinking because in more developed jurisdictions, you go to the UK and others, look at the number of secretaries you have in the United States. It's a freaking continent, for crying out loud. It's a continent on its own. Look at the number of secretaries you have. Look at in the UK, the number you have there. But then the counter argument would be that they have proper systems. Their systems have evolved to the point where, work flows, work flourishes, and you can have a few people at the helm of affairs doing the work. But what would it take for us to get there? Because it doesn't appear, someone else could come and give us 200 ministers and would have nothing to say about that. That is why some people also point to the Constitution and say, you know what, in other jurisdictions, maybe there are caps here and there. Maybe we should start, capping off some of these, because if you leave politicians to do whatever they will, this is what happens.
Exactly. Those measures will require legislative processes, maybe constitutional review, and so on and so forth. But
oh, blimey. We appear to have lost the connection there. We'll try to reconnect with Suleimana Brahima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. But some interesting thoughts he was sharing there. Suleimana, I think we have you back.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. So the point I was making is that we have a situation where close to 100, if not more, ministers are serving. We have a situation where the presidency alone, constantly we are being reminded and being told about how much is allocated to the presidency and how much presidential staffers have been appointed on Article 71 conditions and so on and so forth. Why is the president not talking about those things as areas to cut in terms of the measures? The president still has a minister who has been living outside this country in the United States for over a year now. And the person remains a minister, and so long as she remains a minister, it is right to think that the person will be paid her salary. Why is the president not dealing with matters like that? So I really don't think that the president is really serious about the measures that he talks about and the demands that he is making on other people to sacrifice. I don't think that I've seen any sacrifice, any measures that indicates a clear and serious sacrifice on the part of the government and on the part of the president.
All right. Let me look at two more angles of this entire script briefly so we can proceed from there. I'm focusing a bit on it because of the relevance of it, the weight the story carries. Now, the story also captures that the current economic challenges, he added, and he here would be Mr. President, were on a global scale, which had affected many countries, but he gave the assurance that the government was leaving no stone unturned in resolving the challenges. We've been inundated with talk about, we're hit by COVID and we're hit by the Russo-Ukrainian war. We also know that for every time we've gone to the IMF, for example, there has been some crisis of sorts. But let's even let that slide. We're also looking at the fact that the Russo-Ukrainian war has been blamed to a large extent. We see the impact across the world, but I always say, to what extent? There are different countries feeling different pressures. Recently, Sri Lanka capitulated. It succumbed. The president had to, flee the country. In our instance, we have seen the Russians right here in Ghana come and say, look, don't blame what you're facing in terms of your economy on us. We have nothing to do with it. But we also keep saying, this is the situation. What is your reflection on that? To what extent does Suleimana Brahima feel the Russo-Ukrainian war has affected anything? And secondly, you talk about the piss poor conditions of service of teachers. The caption of the story is "Restore Services, President Appeals to Teachers." Right call in terms of saying, go back and do what you're supposed to do. Students are suffering. Some are going to sit exams and all of that. They would suffer if you don't go back to the classroom. Two issues, as quickly as you can address them.
Well, first of all, Russia, Ukraine, and the global crisis, it's something that one cannot wish away at all. Indeed, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has had some global effect on economies, on food prices, on fuel prices, and so on. And I don't think that we are an island to those effects. I'm sure we've also been hit to some extent. Beyond that, there is also the global crisis emanating from COVID and others. So even in the US, the UK, the advanced societies, inflation is going up, prices of fuel have gone up, and all of that. So certainly there has been some impact on us from those effects. However, it's about how we have managed our own affairs. If you look at COVID, for example, which we blame for some of the crises or some of the issues that we have, yes, industry to a large extent, a lot of them were shut down, hotels were not operating, the tourist sector shut down and all of that. But we also had significant amount of money from the crisis. IMF alone, the last time I was listening to your colleague Evans Mensah do an analysis that pointed to the fact that during the period, IMF alone gave us about 2.4 billion dollars. The World Bank has indicated, we had hundreds of millions of dollars as a result of the pandemic. How did we manage that? We messed up, and we saw it as an opportunity to amass wealth, to dissipate resources, and to embezzle funds through funny schemes like, say, providing hot meals to the poor, awarding fishy contracts for fumigation when we knew that fumigation cannot do anything in the context of COVID, because other countries then would not have been suffering. Italy, Spain, people were dying in thousands. If fumigation was what they needed to do, they would have been in a better position to do that than us. But we saw it as an opportunity to embezzle funds through fishy contracts and all of that. And so, yes, we can talk about the global crisis, but we had our opportunity out of the crisis, and we messed it up. The president calling on teachers to go back, yes, I think that we cannot say schools should be shut down as a result of the demands on the part of the teachers, which is legitimate. But I'm sure that if the president is making that call, we should also see him act in a way that demonstrates why the teachers must go back to their classrooms. If, as I said, we see the president announce tomorrow that as a result of the crisis, I have cut down the number of ministries to 50. I've reduced presidential staffers to 40% or 50% what it was. I have, decided henceforth all ministers, if you are moving within Accra and its enclave, V8s must be parked, because government is no longer going to be able to subsidize the cost of fuel. People would then see that, yes, we are in crisis, and the government or the head of family or the father is taking measures that, require sacrifices on the part of all of us.
Right.
And if the president continues to keep this balloon administration with all the unnecessary expenditures and calling on the poor teacher to go back to the classroom, I don't think that it is justified and it is legitimate.
Right. When you look at the middle spread, center spread of the Daily Graphic newspaper, the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission is set to meet organized labor tomorrow. And this would involve 23 labor unions and associations in respect of their demands. But let me wrap on the international front with the Daily Graphic and then move on to the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Biden defends Saudi visit, and the American president has defended his upcoming visit to Saudi Arabia amid criticism the trip represents a backslide in his administration's commitment to human rights. Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia is part of a wider Middle Eastern tour from July the 13th to the 16th. That includes stops in Israel and the occupied West Bank. But of course, he's caught some flack on the back of that decision. His critics saying it's a backslide as far as that visit is concerned. Elon Musk to terminate $44 billion Twitter deal in a shocking pirouette. He's already put pen to paper, though, so only the courts now will determine what exactly the way forward is. Maybe, finally, Elon has bitten more than he can chew. There's Russian rockets hit Ukraine apartment block, and at least 15 people were killed and 24 more feared trapped after Russian Uragan rockets hit a 5-story apartment block in Ukraine's Donetsk region. But finally, the story that I really want you to focus on, Suleimana. Sri Lankan protesters vow to occupy palace until leaders resign. And protesters have said they will continue to occupy the Sri Lankan presidential and prime ministerial residences until both leaders officially resign. We've seen the president say, you know what, and we've seen footage, interesting footage from the BBC concerning what appears to be the president, sneaking out of the country, his bags and everything. Interestingly, the V8s and all that we've been talking about, they were all left in the presidential palace. They couldn't be taken away. And Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to, flee like a mouse that has seen a cat. I found it really interesting. And if you watch that BBC, just that 4-minute clip or so, at the end, the reporter says something very interesting. Leaders across the world, beware. Your quick reflection on that.
Well, the Sri Lankan situation is quite a sad development. The build-up started way back, and certainly things were not going right. But in countries like that, such as those in Africa, where people come to power to amass wealth and to ensure that their family and friends are sorted out, it is quite difficult for leaders to act consensuously. In other countries where people come to power in order to serve their countries honestly, I mean, it doesn't take anything to resign. We've seen Boris Johnson resign, Theresa May resigned, before her, her predecessor resigned, and we see resignations in the West all the time. But in societies, developing societies such as ours, in Sri Lanka and those places, people come to power and it is not about the interest, the true interest of the people, but it's about their own interest and how they can live like queens and kings. And so it's a very sad development, but as was said, it sends a signal to all leaders around the world that you cannot take people for granted forever. At some point, the people will demonstrate that indeed the power belongs to them. And at that point, when they decide to act, there's little that can be done. There is little that the military, the police, the security around the leadership can do, because once the systems break down, everything breaks down. And so, yes, leaders have to be aware of how they lead, because in the end, when the people decide to rise up, there's nothing that can stop them. We just have to all appeal to our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka that at the end of the day, when the storm settles, there will be a country to build. And so in terms of destroying properties and so on and so forth, they should be aware that in the end, it's not a war. It's not like Russia invading Ukraine and destroying the country. It is their own country. And when leadership is restored and the storm settles, there will be a country to build. And that's how they must act and think about the current situation.
All right. Let's get into the Ghanaian Times newspaper. I'll have us focus on two stories, but the broader stories in the paper. At Eid al-Adha prayers, go back to classrooms, President appeals to striking teacher unions. There's also President Akufo-Addo Mahama consoled Japan over assassination of Shinzo Abe. We all know former, longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan. And it's even more curious because these killings, in fact, gun violence in Japan is almost non-existent. Almost non-existent. In the year 2014, they had how many? About 6 incidents, while juxtaposed with the United States, which had over 33,000. So you see the difference. And it has taken Japanese society by quite the scruff of the neck, really. Very shocking incident there. And the reasons given by the assassin, his mother had been affected by some group to which the former prime minister belonged and all of that. We commiserate with the people of Japan. A gentle person, really, Shinzo Abe. But be vigilant, report suspicious characters to security agents, national security telling us that. The two stories I want us to focus on, Suleimana. Food shortage hits Upper West Region SHS, S's if you like. Chas threatens to close down schools. It's a matter we're going to be delving into. That is on page 17 of the newspaper. And the Conference of Heads of Assisted Schools in the Upper West region says it will be compelled to close down senior high schools in the region by July 15 if sufficient money is not received to cater for the feeding and other needs of the students. In a statement released by the conference after a meeting at the Queen of Peace Senior High School on July the 6th, the CHAS stated that there was serious food shortage in the various senior high schools due to a break in supply of commodities to the schools by suppliers. It said the decision was reached because the schools could no longer feed the school children as there was no food, and said upon interaction with the food suppliers contracted by the buffer stock, it was revealed that they were refusing to perform their end of the bargain due to non-payment of outstanding money owed for supplies delivered earlier. So that is one of the issues, and it's become dicey for these students. I mean, I've seen interactions where they have stopped the students from engaging in certain activities like PE and all of that, because you don't go and do these things on an empty stomach, basically. I've seen some of these. The other issue I want you to just fuse to it and react for me so that we can wrap is this international story. Kagame to seek fourth term as Rwandan president, and Rwanda's leader, who has been in power for 2 decades, has said he would consider remaining in office for another 20 years. Paul Kagame told a French TV channel he would stand for president again at the next election in 2024. Mind you, in 2015, he changed the constitution, allowing him to stay until 2034. In the last presidential election 5 years ago, official figures showed he won 99% of the vote, which many outside the country dismissed as a sham. But what has been Paul Kagame's reaction? He is 64. He says, I would consider running for another 20 years. I have no problem with that. Elections are about people choosing. On that one, when you react to it, Suleimana, I want you to look at this. I am of the opinion that if Nkrumah had more time, maybe Ghana would have got better. Some say Nkrumah was a bit of a despot. We have the example of Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. Look at them. Within 3 decades, look at what he did to that country. But then again, we have democratic principles. And, you know, there's the entire mix, and sometimes it becomes very convoluted. What do? Do we allow one person to go? If the person is good, should we just let them go? I mean, what is it? That is the situation in which Rwanda sort of finds itself. And we all acknowledge there are some very good things happening in Rwanda. So 2 stories for your quick reflection, and it's a wrap.
Well, first of all, the developments in Upper West region is again one of the issues that reveal the poverty of our state and the poverty of governance that we find ourselves in. Because you would say that if you look at what the kinds of things that we are able to do, the kinds of services that we are able to provide to leadership, and you look at basic things as food for school kids, and we not being able to meet that kind of service is quite baffling, you know, as a country. But of course, teachers cannot decide that by themselves they would use their farm produce to feed their kids. That's if they have. And the teachers, I'm sure, in the various secondary schools, even if they decide that they were putting their salaries together every month, I doubt that their salaries put together in one school can feed kids for 2 days or 3 days. So certainly the government has a responsibility, and one wonders why suppliers of food to schools are not being paid. Again, it comes down to all the arrangements that are made. Maybe something that would cost a school some 100,000 cedis is being given out there to contractors at 300,000 or 400,000 so that somebody will get a kickback and all of that. So it comes down to the state of affairs that we find ourselves in. Very unfortunate, but the teachers have little to do. I mean, they are there to teach and to administer the school, not to provide food to the kids. So if that is what this has gotten to, well, it's unfortunate, but what can they do? They may then have to close down the school unless the right things are done in terms of paying the contractors or the suppliers so that food is delivered. And I hope that the government will take steps to ensure that the schools in Upper West are not closed. And given that this is coming from Upper West, I wouldn't be surprised that the situation may not be different from Upper East, from Savannah, from Northern region, from Northeast, and maybe other parts of the country. So it's a critical matter that the government needs to pay attention to. On Kagame, yes, we've all been talking about Rwanda and the development model that they've had there. I think that it comes down to what a group of people in a country decide to choose. If the change of the constitution was done in such a way that it allowed people to express themselves, and the people thought that, well, this is the person we want because he's done quite a lot, what can we do? The other thing is if it was done in a very brutish way, such that it was just something being pushed down the truth, that was pushed down the truth of citizens, then that is really unfortunate, because that's where the human rights issues come up. But again, as I said, it comes down to what a group of people have chosen. Angela Merkel just stepped down last year or the year before, and he had been in power for, I suppose, about 16 years. And she was hailed as one of the icons when it comes to leadership, not just in terms of Germany, but also providing leadership globally. And so if the people of Rwanda decide that, look, we wouldn't mind, we would not have term limits, as long as the person in power delivers and serves our interests and provides our needs, well, so be it. But if it's also being done in such a way that, well, the president has the military, the police, and abusing opposition parties, opposition leaders, and I think there was a lady who wanted to contest also, she was arrested, maltreated and thrown into jail. I don't think that then is leadership. I think that is autocracy.
Right.
And that should be allowed to prevail. And the AU has some role to play in here. What do we want as a continent? Do we want one leader to be there forever? Because leadership is also about grooming successors. So if you are a leader, then you shouldn't be afraid when you leave, because you would have groomed somebody or identified somebody and built their capacity, and be confident that when you leave, the person will continue to deliver the good things that you have in mind. But if you haven't done that, then certainly that also takes away a bit of your leadership qualities. And so the AU would have to step in to ensure that the right things are done, so that it wouldn't provide an example for other countries to also say, hey, if Kagame has done it, then I would also do it. And before you realize, we are back into the turmoil of leadership, or people in leadership not wanting to leave, such as what we've witnessed in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, leading to the coup d'etat in Guinea, and so on and so forth.
Another beautiful session with you, Suleiman Ibrahima, and we're most grateful that you've taken time off on this holiday. You should be resting, but we've drawn you out. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Week.
All right. Suleiman Ibrahima, Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, joining us. The rest of the conversation continues when we get into our big stories. We're going to be talking about those secondary schools in the Upper West region that have, issues when it comes to the shortage of food. We're going to be talking about the labor unions as well, and their entire situation when it comes to the cost of living allowance. But up next, we'll serve you sports. Do stay. Surprised? Well, it is a holiday. Welcome on the sports belt of the AM show. And in our first story, head coach of the national amateur boxing team, Ofori Asare, is confident Ghana will excel at this year's Commonwealth Games. 9 boxers, including female Dr. Ornella Southard, will represent Ghana in Birmingham in July. Coach Ofori Asare, who guided Samuel Techi to win bronze in Tokyo, expects the Black Bombers to live up to expectation.
We have boundless, let me say, talent, and we are not a pushover when it comes to the Commonwealth Games. We always go there and at least come home with some medal. This time, I see a new team, young team, that because of the coming 2023 African Games that we are hosting, we want to have more of these young boxers there to be able to, because we don't want the situation where after the Commonwealth Games, all of them will be going into professional, which there's nothing you can do, because the 2023 Games is also very, very, very closer. So to me, as a coach, we have a young team which has a big future, and they are showing a whole lot of prospect, and I'm seeing that we will do better than the past Commonwealth. That means the just recent Commonwealth that we had only bronze. I'm believing that we can change the color of the medal and also maybe add some addition into it. So if, as I'm seeing, it will go on and the Federation will continue supporting us, they are supporting, and maybe corporate bodies also kick in, the government support is also coming, and all those things are on board and things go on well, and they develop the good feeling for the Commonwealth Games, then something can happen.
Well, on our next story, an Accra-based third division team is leaving no stone unturned in its bid to become a model team as well as produce players to feed the various national teams. Joy Sports' Nana Sari Bediako was at the camping base of this team a couple of days ago.
The club is based in Oibi in the Greater Accra region of Ghana. It was formed in the year 2021 and it has just one objective: to set example for other third division teams in the region. Unlike in many clubs, players of Asanska FC train and live at their training complex. Here is promising attacker Josephat Yanguro.
On a normal day for us, in the morning we get up, we go for morning devotion. After the devotion, we go for training. After training, we wash, then bath, go for our breakfast, then lunch, then have our rest, then go for class. We have a class session here. And after the class, we also do some field works, personal training. After the personal training, we go to the TV room to watch some soccer games to improve ourselves. After that, we pray again in the night and go to sleep.
Jake Ablo, a former footballer, is head coach of the club.
With our Sanska, we scout all around, so we have great players with great potentials, and the quality wise is higher, so we are always scouting for the best, so the quality is high. Oh yeah, of course, we've got young players and they are ready. I mean, they are ready for the under 17 and under 20. In the senior level, they are not up there yet. They are just young and upcoming. They've got great potentials, and I believe that in the near future, Ghana will produce, and Asanska will produce the best youth footballers for the national team.
David Oziel, technical director for Asanska FC, shares the main vision of the Model Division 3 club.
We are focusing 100% on getting the best talent to take them aboard. Second, and it's connect me to the second reason. The second reason, it's our biggest relationship with European clubs from Spain, Austria, Israel. Only this year we're expecting to take 10 players. Austria, as I said, Turkey, Dubai, all of those places, they are waiting for us to bring them the players we are scouting for. And we are only focusing on that.
Clubs need a lot of money to keep players in camp for several days. The financial burden is sometimes unbearable for Asanska FC General Manager Nana Kwame Ofori-Asante.
It really is very, very, very expensive operating this kind of business. Because tell you what, we spend about it's a lot of money. Let's say a lot of money because we're feeding them. We accommodating them, electricity, and these guys, they are very active guys, so you can imagine the boss of Bankudo will be eating and all that. So it's very expensive, if you ask me, very expensive.
Asanska FC is a young football club, but its vision is as big as the ocean.
Of tennis, we wrap the AM Sports, but up next we serve you the big stories. Do stay.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for staying on the AM show. I am Bernice Abubedulansa, and we kickstart our conversation on our big stories. We are starting with that one on senior high schools facing a looming crisis of food shortage. And the senior high schools, or the heads of the schools, have attributed the food shortage, with the chairman of CHAS in the Upper East region warning of a shutdown of schools by July 15 if the trend continues. Now, they attribute this to lack of supply. Now, what does this mean for the survival of the students in these schools who are enjoying free SHS? We'll be going to the regions where our correspondents will tell us the situation on the ground. We'll also be speaking to chairman of CHAS in the Upper West region, Magnus Innocent Durr. Hopefully we'll get a reaction from the chairman of NAGRAT, Jacob Anaba Kofi Asare, and also speak to the executive director of the Education Watch. Just this morning, we've received a notification from the PRO of the Ghana Education Service saying that the Ministry of Education has had a meeting with CHAS, and the schools are going to start receiving supplies on the 12th of July, which is tomorrow. But while they wait for that, we'll have a conversation on what has led us to this point and how we can avert this recurring in the future. Let me bring you details of that story as it's captured on myjoyonline.com. So we'll scroll up quickly and bring you details there. So food shortage has hit senior high schools across the country, with the Upper West Region chapter of the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools, CHAS, warning that students and parents may soon be compelled to take up the cost of feeding if government fails to provide supplies in 6 days. In a letter to the regional director of the Ghana Education Service, CHAS noted that the food suppliers contacted by the buffer stock company, as well as local suppliers contacted to help out, are all refusing to do so, citing non-payment of outstanding monies owed them by government. Okay, so this, they say, has exacerbated an already dire situation in schools in the region, with some schools not having enough supplies to last a week. In fact, and there's a quote, an assessment of the situation indicated that most schools cannot go beyond 1 week if nothing urgent is done about it. And we're also told that food in short supply include maize, rice, sugar, palm oil, and other oils, soybeans, sardine and mackerels, and Tom Brown. So what is the Ministry of Education saying this morning? Let me just bring you details of that captured in a post by the PRO of the ministry. So while I wait to bring you that post, let me just head to the Upper West region now. My colleague Rafiq Salam is there for us. Hello, Rafiq.
Hello, Bernice.
Good to have you here. How's the Upper West region?
The region is very calm, still in the mood of the celebration of Eid al-Adha, which is expected to end around 4 p.m. today.
Right. So we've heard from the schools. They are concerned there's no food. Have you had the opportunity to visit some of the higher schools? How are they coping currently?
The situation, as the writer put it in the write-up, is dire. The schools are saying that they are at their worst ends. The fortunate or unfortunate thing that came to them was this celebration of the Eid al-Adha, where the schools are not operating at full strength. You know, majority of the students who are Muslims have been given some kind of a few days to come for the celebration. And so if without the Salah, they wouldn't have been able to even go beyond the 1 week that they have stated in that write-up. And so the headmasters and then also school authorities are saying that they are at their work ends. They have done their best to at least contain the situation. But this one, they were not able to do it because they think that they are not. They think that they can't do. They can't do without these food items that they have listed, and so they have to have this meeting, and then also to at least cry to the government to come to their aid.
So are you aware of what the school children are doing? How are they surviving?
For now, as I rightly put it, that majority of the students are on holidays for the Eid al-Adha, and then also those who are there, they are being fed, but not as it has been, because most of the commodities, most of the items that they will have used are not there. You know, they don't have Tom Brown, they don't have soybean, and also some of the ingredients that they will use to cook this food. And so what they now do is that they can continue to provide them rice for close about 3 days or 4 days. So this time around, it's about what is available at the school, and that's what they cook for the students. If not, they are not going. They are not going with the menu that is stipulated to them by the GES.
Rafiq, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining us, and Barakat de Salah to you.
Thank you very much. Happy Eid to you also.
All right. So we've also been joined via Zoom. Jacob Anaba Kofi Asari has joined us. We also have the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch and Kwesi Kwarteng, PR of the Ghana Education Service. But before I bring them in, let me bring you the latest to this particular development, where we received an indication from the Ministry of Education. Let me just bring that one to you now. And the Minister of Education has just concluded a meeting with the leadership of CHAS on the issue of challenges in the supply of food to some senior high schools. The issue has been resolved, and all affected schools are expected to receive full supplies latest by Tuesday, 12 July 2022, and is signed by Kwesi Kwarteng, PR of the Ministry of Education. I beg your pardon, earlier I said Ghana Education Service. He is the PRO of the Ministry of Education. If I have Mr. Kwarteng on the line, all right. So we will raise Kwesi Kwarteng on the line shortly, but let's speak to Mr. Jacob Anaba, who is with NAGRAT. Hello, sir. Good morning. Thanks for your time. So I'm sure, like many of your colleagues, you are not surprised about this situation. Government has intervened. First off, were you part of the meeting, and are you able to tell us if this intervention is long-lasting or is temporal?
Hello, good morning.
Hello, Mr. Anaba. Good morning. Thank you for joining the program.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Happy Eid. Yeah.
Same to you. So, were you part of this meeting between the Ministry of Education and the heads of assisted senior high schools, or are you aware of what transpired during that meeting?
No. I just got it from you. We're not part of this meeting. But I don't think that is a solution to the issue that has been raised. This has become perennial. It's always there. So solving it by this post, I don't think that's the way to go.
All right. Since you're not privy to what happened in that meeting, let me speak to the PRO of the Ministry of Education who posted this and get more details, then we can take your reaction to that. Good morning, Mr. Kwarteng. Thank you for joining the program. So this particular measure or this assurance you're giving the schools that they will be supply food by Tuesday, which is tomorrow, is this a long-lasting solution or it's a quick fix to the problem?
I think what is most important thing is that there are some challenges, and at every point in time, those challenges must be addressed. Solutions to challenges may be interim. A lot of them too may be a long-term solution. But even within the long-term solution, you may have some lapses that you still have to resolve. The challenge that we have within the food supplies arrangement, which is being coordinated by the buffer stocks, has to do largely with delays of payment, which usually results in delays in the supplies of food. As a long-term measure, the Minister for Education has engaged some banks, ADB for instance, is one, to find an alternative source of payment or funding with the full food supplier arrangement, where suppliers have to supply food, then the banks will quickly go in, pay the claims that these suppliers made, and at the end of the day, government reimburses the bank. So in the long term, that is what we believe will be able to sustain the current arrangements that we are having. But of course, as a very short-term measure, there has been reports of food shortages and potential food shortages in most of the schools. I mean, if you read the press that was issued by Upper West Chapter, clearly they cited a potential food shortage. And based on that, the Minister for Education has to act and intervene. And as I speak with you, arrangements have been far advanced for suppliers to supply food to avoid a potential food shortage within the region and some schools that may have similar challenges. So yes, we do admit there could be challenges. Sometimes it may not necessarily be even delays in payment. A lot of time you may have some logistical constraints like storage facilities being out the food. But like yes, we do admit that it has more to do with the delays of the payment and the suppliers not having the power or the capacity to be able to supply against the future. But this is being worked on. But as of now, those schools that gave a caution of potential shortages, we are addressing them latest by Tuesday. We should see schools in those schools. I mean, I've always insisted that our mandate is to embrace challenges and solve it. We are not there because there will not be any challenges. And we don't run a 100% smooth
All right,
system.
Mr. Kwating, so this issue you say has been resolved, as you put it in your own words. Do you mean that those who have not been paid have received payments? Or once again, you have gone into a certain negotiation or agreements with for them to supply pending payments?
So I recall, I think it was just last Wednesday, where the Minister for Education met with food suppliers in Ghana. And then we admitted that yes, when it comes to payment, there has been some delays. But the parties agreed that due to the urgency of the moment, they will continue to supply ahead of an arrangement that the minister had made to make sure that as soon as possible, their payments are being made so that they'll have the capacity and the muscle to be able to continue.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So these senior high schools that are, all of them definitely, the private public ones running the free senior high school program, parents do not pay for anything including feeding, right?
As far as I'm concerned, that
Okay.
is arranged and their parents do not pay for fees.
Okay, so this is supposed to be fully catered for by government under the free senior high school program. Hello, Mr. Kwating.
I can hear you.
Okay,
yes,
so this is supposed to be catered for by government under the free senior high school program. Why has there been a delay in the payment of food supplied by these suppliers?
Of course, I admitted that there's
Yes, but you didn't tell us why. What's causing that lapse in the system?
The challenge we have is that there's been delays in payments. Is it
that there's no money? Is it that there's no money to?
I don't work with the Ministry of Finance. I'm unable to speak to that effect. What the challenge now is that it is a public knowledge that there's been delay when it comes to the payment of suppliers. But the most important thing is that even though there is delay, it has not affected the supplies of food to the schools, except to say that schools have given caution on the potential shortage. So within the interim, I can say a lot of schools have food. Of course, I mean, there are some food items that generally schools may not have. So if you look at Bapa Store, for instance, there are 17 food items. It is possible that a school may be lacking 1 or 2 food items out of the 17. And so such a school may give a caution. It is also possible that the quantity of supply that the school has within the following days or the following week, it is possible that it's going to finish if there is no supply. And so it is very natural for such a school to give the caution. It does not necessarily mean that there is that imminent shortage within the school. And so yes, there's been such delays. I am unable to speak to why those payments have not been made, because I don't speak for the Ministry of Finance. I speak for the Ministry of Education.
And the Ministry of Education hasn't, is it a case that the Ministry of Education hasn't found out why?
You work with the media. I throw the challenge to you. You can find out from.
No, but fair enough. That's okay. I can't speak to the Finance Ministry, but I have you here now, and I'm asking you, is it the case that you haven't, in trying to resolve this issue, found out from the Ministry of Finance what is causing the delay in payments? Is that a case?
I think what is most important is that we admit there is a challenge. And what is most important is that we are ready to resolve the challenge. How are we ready to resolve the challenge? The challenge has been with the delay of payment. So there has to be an alternative arrangement, where I've made to you an alternative arrangement is that we get some banks to pay later on, government pay the bank. So the problem has to do with a delay. I don't know how you probably want us to put it. A delay with the release of money. And then how do we resolve such a challenge? You get the banks to quickly pay them. Later on, you reimburse the bank.
Right. Mr. Kwati, I'll be wrapping up with you shortly and get a reaction from my other guests. But are you also aware that besides the potential food shortage as a result of the lack of supply of food ingredients to the schools, there's also been a long-standing problem of reduction in rations? So, for example, there were some students who could get at least 2 ladles of rice in the dining hall. It was reduced to 1.5, and some of them now take 1. Are you aware that some schools are? Are
you basing this on a fact or based on speculation? Are you able to?
I'm not speculating. Just a minute. Just a minute. Are you also aware that some schools are now offering to sell bread, for example, to the students instead of giving it to them for free?
They are able to. Come again.
Are you aware that some schools are selling bread, for example, to students instead of giving it to them for free? Some are also.
Are you able to list the schools who quickly going to resolve the problem?
I will give you the schools, but I'm just asking if that has come to your attention.
You see, that is the problem always with the media. A lot of times you speculate.
Let me give you the schools. Hold on, Mr. Kwating. Mr. Kwating, just a minute. I'm not speculating. Go to Accra Girls. We've
not had
and find out. So I won't come and sit here. Please permit me, sir.
We'll look into it. The fact that you mentioned the name of the school does not mean that such an exists.
No,
it was the same media. It was the same media who said Okwapema does not have food. When there was food. It was the same media who said Protect does not have food. The minister went there and announced there was food. I am not running away from the challenge. That yes, there are delays with payments. There are situations where some food items are not there.
Mr. Kwating, this was a simple question of whether it has come to your attention or not. I just wanted a yes or no answer. Are you aware?
I think I also gave a simple question on helping me with the school.
And I just did that. So are you aware, yes or no?
We've not had any official complaint to that effect. But quickly that you brought to our attention, we are going to visit the school, look into it, and resolve such a challenge if it exists.
I appreciate your time here this morning. Kwesi Kwating is PRO of the Ministry of Education, and we've just been talking about the intervention by the ministry to resolve food supply issues to senior high schools across the country. Well, let's progress with the conversation. Magnus Innocent is chairman of CHAS, and he joins us. I'll be going back to my earlier guest, who is with NAGRAT, Vice President of NAGRAT, Jacob Anaba. I'll be going back to him shortly. But let me find out from the chairman of CHAS, at least he can give us more on what happened in that meeting between government in Chas, or the Ministry of Education in Chas. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining the program.
Good morning.
Great.
Viewers and listeners.
So we've just been told by the PRO of the Ministry of Education that there has been some sort of arrangement. The food suppliers have been spoken to at least supply food pending an arrangement or a certain repayment of the monies owed them. Are you satisfied with this arrangement, and are you confident that it will yield the results that you want?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to make a correction before I go on. Upper West Chas, we said that if by the 15th we don't get enough food rations, we might be compelled to ask the students to feed themselves. We didn't talk of shutting down the schools. We don't have that power to shut down schools.
All right.
So that is a correction.
Thank you, sir.
To say. But then coming to the meeting, yesterday we had a meeting with the minister and with buffer stock. And yes, during the meeting, the minister outlined a number of measures that we were taking to ensure that food gets to the schools by Tuesday or starting Tuesday. So yes, he has assured us that we will get the rations that we need. And we are hoping that by the Friday, we'll have enough rations so that we will not be compelled to go the line that we will be compelled to if the rations don't get to the schools.
So these rations, will they translate into increased portions and quality when children go to the dining hall? Hopefully. We hope that if we get the full rations, he says they will be able to supply rations at least for 2 months whilst they work on supplying the rest of the rations. So if we get the full rations for the 2 months, definitely it will translate into increase in rations and quality. So this problem, this is not the first time you're having issues with food or potential food shortage. What has the ministry been telling you about what is resulting in the lapse? Why exactly are food suppliers not being paid on time? Have you been told?
Not exactly. At least with the meetings that we have had with the ministry and with our management, they have told us, they have admitted the challenges that are confronting the schools. They have told us of what they are doing. But as to whether what has led to delays in payment, we cannot tell.
Like I mentioned, this is not the first time you're having issues with food shortage, but are you able to paint the picture for us? Prior to the Free Senior High School program, and since the inception of the Free Senior High School program, what has if there has been any difference, what has it been?
I will say that it has to do with the suppliers. That's all. Prior to senior high, free senior high, each school has its local suppliers where they could negotiate. But now with free senior high, you see that the supplies are coming from buffer stock. So it is difficult for the schools to engage the suppliers directly. And sometimes when the situation becomes critical and buffer stock gives you the permission to engage local suppliers, sometimes you meet some resistance because, like we talked of the payment issue. That is basically the difference.
Which system works better for the senior high schools? Where you have to engage locally or when you have to rely on the buffer stock?
I think this question will be better answered after maybe we have a look at both systems critically and see which one works. But offhand, I don't think I'll be able to give an answer.
So there are parents who are concerned about the quality of food served in the dining halls in our schools across the country. And we've picked up reports of some schools where students say we used to have 2 ladles of rice, now we have only 1.5, or we are being told to bring our own fish to eat our kinke, or we are being sold bread in the dining hall to complement our breakfast. Is the assurance that once the supplies come in, all these will stop, or there will still be issues with some of the complementary elements to feeding?
I think one of the contributor alluded to the fact that one of the problems we are having is underweight, because if they're supposed to bring you 100 kg of maize and they bring you 80 kg, you know what it means. So one of the basic things that we have is the issue of underweight. Then we also have the issue of short supply, in the sense that sometimes a supplier is asked to bring, for instance, 100 bags of maize, and he says that because of the price challenges, he'll rather negotiate, and maybe he will want to bring you 80, 70. Sometimes some go as far as 60 and they take 40.
So in a sense, inflation is affecting, is that it? Is the cost of products as seen across the markets in the country is affecting the amount of food that you receive? Is that it?
Definitely, it's a general problem, I guess.
When I was in high school, there were some schools that were allowing parents to do what they call support feeding. So you had some schools say, well, we want the students to eat well so they can learn well. So kindly support us with the little that you can so that we complement what government is giving us and give your children good feeding. I'm sure you are aware that there were some schools that were doing that. Would CHAS want to revisit that module, especially in these times where food keeps soaring, the price of food keeps soaring?
Definitely, the role of the parents as stakeholders in education cannot be undermined. And so if the parents can support in any way, not just only with food, but in any way they can support the schools, I think it will be a welcome idea. The long and short of it all is that they support the schools so that quality learning and teaching and learning can take place.
Right. So finally, I would like to just find out from you if this new arrangement that has been made cuts across the country, cuts across senior high schools in the country, or it's primarily focused on schools in the Upper West because they released the statement.
Another point of correction, we didn't release a statement. We wrote a letter to our regional director. How it got into the public space, we don't know. But we wrote directly to our regional director. We didn't release a statement. But anyway, coming to the meeting, yes, yesterday.
Hello, Mr. Dare. Well, too bad. It appears we've lost Mr. Dare's feed there, but that's Innocent Dare, who is he was the chairman of CHAS, and he was just giving us some details on whether this resolution covers all senior high schools or just schools in the Upper West region. I'm told he's back on the line. So quickly, you were answering that question for us, sir.
Yes, I was saying that it can.
Well, while I wait for him to come back, let me just go to Mr. Anapa, who is Vice President of NAGRAT. Thank you for holding on, sir. So we've heard from the PRO of the Ministry of Education, and we've also heard from the Chairman of CHAS. You are with NAGRAT. Already you're on strike, and this particular issue is also coming in, and the students are the ones who are bearing the brunt of all these. Okay. Are you satisfied with the resolution put in by the Ministry of Education on this matter?
Thank you once again. To be frank with you, this new JEC sort of solution or stopgap measure is not and will not work. NAGRA had earlier called for a review of the whole SHS policy, and that will also look at the buffer stock issue. The headmaster alluded to the fact that there are underweight of supply, and that is one of the issues that is causing this problem that we witness almost every year. The PRO of the Ministry of Education has stated clearly that the major issue is with finance. Yes, finance plays a major issue, but when the food supply to the schools is not up to the quantity, we have issues like this that will come up. Now, one of the main aims of this buffer stock was to relieve the headmasters to concentrate on academic work. Today, what do we see? The headmasters are now going to the market, trying to get something to keep the students in the school. So it means that this policy has failed. And therefore, we need to review it. We are not happy and we are not satisfied at all. Because when the students go hungry in the schools, they are unable to concentrate in the classroom.
Do you have a situation, Mr. Naba, do you have a situation where sometimes teachers have to intervene and support some students with feeding? Does that happen?
Yeah, it does. It does. It happens in most of the schools. You had a report from Accra where the students have complained of the food that they are giving. They have reduced the ration or they have even changed it. And that is affecting the academic calendar because students will have to stay long before they are called into the dining hall to be fed. So they will go back to the classroom and they've lost a lot of time just looking for food to eat. So this is a situation that we need to confront head on. For the financial aspect, government must come clear. But the supply chain where schools are giving underweight supply must be looked at. Either somebody is profiting from this supply or the supervision is not done well. You ask the head to compare previous, before the free SHS and now. When headmasters were giving the bulk money to purchase, we never heard of issues like this, apart from the northern schools who were on scholarship. But in the southern schools, we never experienced shortage of food because the headmasters dealt directly with the suppliers, and they were able to have that confidence in the headmasters that they will pay when they get the money. So what is happening to buffer stock? We need to investigate what is happening there. If not, we will never get this result.
So you said you weren't satisfied with this. You call it a knee-jerk approach to solving the problem. So what for you, at least, will bring that long-term resolution that you want?
All stakeholders must sit at the table so that the concerns will be brought forth and we'll all look at it and see where we will have to straighten up if there are crooked ways. I mean, like I said, the suppliers, why do you supply food items below the quantity that you've been asked to supply, and you go and compel the headmaster to sign, the headmaster has cannot reject because he needs to keep the students in school, and they are forced to sign underweight supplies, and that cannot take them to the end of the semester. We need to sit down, and everybody must come to the table and be frank and speak to the issue, and we'll look for a solution to it permanently.
Mr. Naba, I'll come back to you to take your reactions to the president's appeal for you to go back to the classrooms. But now we've been joined by Dr. Clement.
I hope you are not also appealing to me.
I'll come back to you shortly. We also have Dr. Clement Apak, ranking member of the Education Committee of Parliament. He joins us via phone. Thank you for your time, Doc. So last week I spoke to you. We were talking about the cost of living allowance that teachers were requesting for. This time round, it is about food shortage in our senior high schools. We've heard from CHAS, we've heard from the Vice President of NAGRAT, who is asking that the free senior high school policy be reviewed because it appears that this is, in a way, linked to the program and how it is being managed. Your quick thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say good morning to you and co-discussants. And I must say that the Vice President of NAGRAT, Mr. Naba, actually is my mate. We were mates at the University of Ghana, proud vandals, as we call ourselves. And so I'm not surprised that he is being very truthful and factual. After all, our motto is the truth stands. Look, he's called for a review of the free senior high school policy. It's long overdue. And time without number, my good self and many other stakeholders have all called for a review of the program. We have always said that the program is a good program. It is born out of our constitution. But the implementation leaves a lot more to be desired. And as we speak, I am surprised that for a program that we have invested, according to the finance minister, in 5 years, some 7.6 billion Ghana cedis into, and for 2022 alone, we have approved some 2.3 billion. We will still have situations where buffer stock food suppliers are refusing to supply food to the secondary schools because of a lack of funds. I mean, are we really prioritizing education, and for that matter, a program that Akakpo and his government have said is a flagship program? Because if that were the case, I don't believe that we should still owe buffer stock to the extent that buffer stock suppliers have refused to supply food to schools. And look, the reports we are getting is that this situation is not confined to secondary schools only in the Upper West region. It is across board. And I think the sooner government agrees to this clarion call for a review so that we can resituate the program and look at what has worked and what has not worked to adjust it, the better for us. Look, if you were to look at the PIAC, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee's monitoring report, 2018-2019, of the free senior high school policy, all of these issues that we are discussing have been captured. One, this decision to centralize the food supply chain, where contracts are given from Accra to persons who sometimes don't even know the location of the schools to supply them schools, has created a conduit for high-level corruption. So it is not just the lack of availability of funds for buffer stock suppliers, but even when the funds are there, they either undersupply the food items, as has been indicated, they supply unwholesome or expired food items, or sometimes they increase the weight of grains by deliberately adding impurities. We have seen the pictures, we have seen the videos. So the current system is just not fit for purpose of the bat. So it is not just about lack of funding, but it's the undersupply where the headmasters have no say, and it is also the addition of impurities to increase the weight where the headmasters have no say. So the best option going forward would be to review the program. As a member of the Public Accounts Committee, we have sat on reports of pre-tertiary institutions, secondary schools, and it is bad. We are even looking at a situation where we want to activate processes to get just the buffer stock food supply system as it pertains to the secondary schools audited, because something is just not adding up in the whole narrative around the food supply system within the context of the way it is being run. So we wait to see how soon government is going to make resources available, because I don't see a reason why there can't be resources when we have approved some 2.3 billion for the program in 2022.
Dr. Park, we've been told that there's been a meeting between CHAS and the Ministry of Education, and supply will begin tomorrow, 12th July 2022. To the schools.
Well, you see, that is nice and dandy, but for how long can this keep replicating itself? It has almost become an annual ritual. And in fact, sometimes it happens 2 or 3 times. You have to remember that earlier this year, the issue of food shortages came up. And in fact, it was very clear that CHAS was going to let the students go. The government was able to find some money, 200 million, to pay buffer stock suppliers, when in fact the figures are shown that government owed buffer stock suppliers 500 million. So those areas are there. And that is the question I continue asking. How come we have invested so much, we continue to invest these colossal amounts of money every year in the program, and yet we continue to have these problems? It simply does not add up. And you see, my colleagues on the other line and honest parents and persons in the educational sector will tell you that the challenges bedeviling the program are beyond even just the food supply. Are you aware that the program, by its design, is supposed to grant every student 1 core textbook per core subject? But that is not happening. And I can many several examples where what the program is supposed to do and the parameters within which it is supposed to cover, that is not happening. And yet when you speak, you know, you are labeled as somebody who is against the program. And we say, look, we want the program to succeed. It is a national program. We are investing national resources in it. So when there are challenges, admit those challenges. Let us all sit around the table and try to see how we can rectify these challenges so that we can get value for money, so that our wards, the future of this nation, can have the serenity of mind, the peacefulness of mind to study. We are dealing with teenagers whose emotional well-being and their growth is impacted by the type of diet that they consume. So when you have a situation like this, where there are food shortages, where sometimes they eat one staple all week, and even the rations are so low, they are being supplied with expired food items. I mean, clearly, we are doing great harm to the future of this nation, and that is not right.
Thank you for joining the conversation. Dr. Clement Park is ranking member on Parliament Education Committee. Let's head to the Central Region now and get a sense of what is happening in some schools there. My colleague Richard Kojanyako has visited some of them. Hello, Richard. What were you able to gather?
So I'm currently at the Sadok College. I've been to about 4 senior high schools apart from the Sadok College. And what I can report is that in all these schools, special arrangements have been made, so the students are being fed. But there are some problems that these heads and school authorities are facing. The students are being underfed, not because they would want to underfeed them, but because the situation calls for that. So when the supplies are being done, they need like 15 bags of sugar, for instance, but they have to sign for 15 bags and they are given 10 bags of sugar. to make up for the costs of the prevailing situation. And so the students, instead of being fed normally, they are being underfed. The quality.
Hello, Richard. It appears that Richard's feed is frozen there. We will try to rectify that problem. But let's bring in Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch, Kofi Asare, and take his perspective on all of this. So once again, free senior high school policy is on the chopping board, even though this is food shortages is directly related to the program. Ms. Asare, did we bite more than we can chew with this particular program?
Good morning. Morning to your charity audience and co-panelists. Anyway, I don't even know what to say. I'm tired of complaining about or discussing issues relating to food. Feeding students shouldn't be an issue that should preoccupy, policymakers, stakeholders who should be doing more strategic, thinking and analysis. Unfortunately, we found ourselves in this corner. We boxed ourselves in this corner, and sometimes it is to be honest with you, it's very, very frustrating, and to say the least vexatious. If we are going to continue this way, because it's not news. It's just like application grant delaying every year for the past 16 years. It's not news. So we've managed to create another culture of delayance within the education valuation. And I'm very, very worried that, we are creating problems instead of finding solutions to existing ones. Now, all the discussions point to the fact that there is a problem. Unfortunately, I'm not sure government sees that there's a problem. And the fact that government doesn't see this arena as a challenge, it means that we are not going to solve this problem. That is the reality.
What makes you think government doesn't see the problem? We know that the Minister of Education has met with CHAS and they have offered some solutions to the problem. That alone is an admission of a problem. We are also told by the PRO that he met food suppliers. Is that not indicative enough that at least the minister is aware that there's a problem?
No. The minister is managing the symptoms of a problem. He's very, very concerned. The ministry is very, very concerned, and they are doing everything possible they can to manage the symptoms of a problem.
So what is the problem? In your estimation, what is the real problem?
The problem is that we have a poor disbursement of funding for feeding under the free senior high school. It's a problem of low liquidity. You issue invoices to contractors to supply food to various schools across the country. And as we speak, you are owing contractors to the tune of 320 million Ghana cedis. Some are being owed as far back as September last year. If you are a contractor, a supplier, you are supposed to supply rice to a particular school in Boko, how are you going to continue supplying if you have been owed in excess of 7 months? How is it possible? So you see, the Ministry of Education and Buffer Stock have designed a very beautiful system for distributing food. Even though I'm not in support of the centralization of the procurement of food, but they have designed a beautiful system that should work if funded. Unfortunately, that system needs an average of about 100 million Ghana cedis every month to ensure that suppliers who have been contracted under the system and invoice supply food are able to do so. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Finance is just not disbursing in accordance with the cash flow projections that the Ministry of Education has submitted to it. If you remember in May, the Honorable Minister indicated on the back of the 200 million disbursements, out of which about half went to feeding, or other, all the 200 wasn't for feeding. Some went into textbooks and other stuff, but about 100 went into feeding. On the back of that particular release, the minister indicated that the Ministry of Education have actually found a solution to the problem. And that the problem was that there was no realistic projections, okay, for the Ministry of Finance to continue. So I was very happy when I heard that, even though I was surprised that there wouldn't be a financial projections. I mean, I was surprised that after 4 years, Free Senior High School Secretariat and the Ministry of Education did not have a realistic financial projection. But I wanted to believe that was perhaps a challenge that the minister obviously identified and had fixed. Unfortunately, less than 2 months along the line, we are back to the same place. So it means that the challenge is not about developing realistic financial projections for the Ministry of Finance. The challenge is not re-engineering the system and using an ambulance service approach, as we call in policy making, to get a supplier to as part of an emergency package, supply rations to schools that are not having sugar and rice. That is not the solution. The solution is having a system that ensures that the Ministry of Finance will disburse an average of 100 million every month to oil the food distribution engine, and most importantly, clear the about 320 million backlog. If you do this, suppliers will have the resources to buy and supply. That is the problem. Until that problem has been addressed, I'm sorry, we are all trying our best to manage the symptom of a problem. That is why I'm saying that we are not addressing them. If we address the problem, we won't be discussing a recurrence less than 2 months after the previous one. And this is not just Upper East, Upper West, sorry. I've spoken to a lot of schools this morning, even in the Ashanti region. Bread is out. Many schools have not had bread for a long time. So bread is out. We know bread is no more news. So the lack of bread is no more news. Sugar, same. So yeah, but my information is that there's been an arrangement overnight, and then I'm told that about 60,000 bags of sugar has been shipped. I mean, it's being shipped today to the schools in distress, and then some quantity of rice as well under an emergency package, and then it's going to arrive in the school from tomorrow. And so there is hope, in the short term. But as I keep saying, the cause of the problem is that Parliament has approved government's budget to spend over 2 billion on Free Senior High School. About 70% of the Free Senior High School's budget is feeding. About 70%. About 1 billion or so to fund the Free Senior High Schools. If the Ministry of Finance does not disburse that money, it is not the doing of the Ministry of Education. It is not the doing of the years. And that's why I keep advising the media that when there are shortages under Free Senior High School, don't go to the Ministry of Education or GES. Don't go to buffer stock, because the system has been put in place. What is needed is how to oil the engine. Right. Go to the Ministry of Finance and find out why they are not disbursing according to the schedule required to let the system work. That is what we all should. Right. If we put pressure on, they will do the right thing.
Right, Mr. Asari, so like you mentioned, a chunk of our allocation for Free Senior High School is going into feeding. There are some parents who suggested we can help. Okay, since discussions on the Free Senior High School program started, there were those who were even suggesting that those who can afford should pay, and then those who are really in need should be given the Free Senior High School access. Now, some parents are saying, look, allow us. We are all aware of what the situation is with food prices, even on the markets. When we go to the market every day, the prices keep increasing. So clearly, even on that angle, there will be a problem in terms of the amount that has been allocated and how much it can procure for the students due to inflation. So is that something the government the ministry should be exploring, where parents say, allow us to help in feeding the children?
Of course. I mean, we have recommended this particular proposal to the government over a 4-year period, that we need to look at cost sharing, the feeding component of the Free Senior High School. It should be possible to means test the student and ask children of middle to higher income earning Ghanaians, to pay. We have data on the income level of every Ghanaian in Ghana today. We are doing a lot of work to formalize, even in the informal sector. And we have an idea, if you want to do means testing like other countries do, in other countries, if you want to attend a private senior high school, or if you are coming from a private basic school, it is used as a means testing mechanism. For instance, if you attended a private junior high school, the government will say pay half of your feeding program because at least you have some money to pay fees. If you attended a public junior high school, you can have 100% free feeding. There are various means that we can undertake means testing if we are politically committed to. But the government of Ghana is not committed to undertaking any means testing on the free senior high school program because of the political nature of it. The free senior high school program is managed as a political program. So government prefers to continue to carry this cross the way it has been carrying all this while. And so I don't see that happening, to be honest with you, because the approach in managing the program is actually a political policy. But we have recommended, and government has indicated that it is not interested in that recommendation, and that whether it can afford it or not, it will continue to foot the bills of rich students and poor students. Having said that, we will continue to appeal to government that it will be in the interest of government to consider means testing at least the feeding component of the free senior high school program. So that children of middle and higher income earning Ghanaians, anyone earning more than 3,000 Ghana cedis, should be able to pay if not full, half of the feeding cost. And how much are we talking about? We are talking of something averaging about 900 cedis or 800 cedis a year, not even a semester, a year. We are talking about average of about 800 cedis a year, not a semester. So even if you have to pay half, it's only 400 cedis. I don't think it's an amount that will lead to a child being disqualified or being denied access to secondary education, especially if the parent is earning 2,000 or 3,000 cedis above. But again, it is for the political authority to determine whether they are ready, but I don't think they are ready to do that. And so I am recommending that parents should, being cognizant of the situation we find ourselves in the implementation of this political flagship, make sure that their children have adequate food so that when there are issues at the dining hall, their children will have a buffer to rely on, buy more sardine, buy more Milo, buy more Gary, buy more stuff. So that don't expect that your children will get the 100% feeding required from dining hall. It is not reasonable. So that you support the government in that way. If government is not ready to invite parents to pay something, then
that would defeat the purpose of free senior high school. Then it means that the poor would not be able to afford a healthy meal a day if it has to be that the rich are giving their children directly, won't it?
That is what happens. That is what happens if you don't means test. Every social policy like this is means tested. For example, LEAP is means tested. Every month, cash grants are sent to about 100,000 beneficiaries that are very poor, the poorest of the poor in Ghana. And I am not receiving one because I'm not among them, and you are also not receiving one. That is how social interventions, pro-poor social interventions are taken. When you means test and you target, you ensure that those in real need will get enough. So that they don't fall into the bracket of struggling. But now, where we are now, because we are not being testing the free senior high school program, yes, children of parents who are poor will now have to struggle with the small amount of food being served in some schools due to shortages. And then with their parents thinking that government is providing everything for free. But as I'm saying, that does not take away the responsibility of the parent to feed their child.
Right.
The free senior high school, the F is a small f. Everything is free.
Right.
Regardless, the parents still has an obligation to take care of their ward. When your ward is going to school, give them enough food so that should the dining system fail because of the liquidity issues that continue to bedevil the distribution of schools, then your child will have a buffer to rely on. Right. Let me indicate that there are two other challenges that were raised by Charles and Jacob.
Quickly, Mr. Asari, you have to do that quickly.
Yeah. The two other challenges that were raised by Charles and Jacob are all they are all symptoms. If a supplier is supplying 60 instead of 100, or a supplier is supplying 100 bags, but then each bag, instead of being 100 kg, is 80 kg, they are all symptoms of the supplier being owed. The supplier is broke. he has locked his cash in the system, and you are owing them 6 months, 8 months, some 2 million, 3 million. So in that case, they don't have money to supply the right amount. So all we are discussing, I'm saying, are symptoms. The main cause of the problem. Let's disburse money from the finance ministry. So go and talk to the finance minister and find out from him what is happening with disbursing funds under the Free Senior School program.
Thanks for your contribution to the discussion. Kofi Asare is Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. We're wrapping up this conversation shortly, but let's go back to the Central Region. Richard Kodunyaku was giving us some information on what's happening in some schools there. Richard, quickly, in a minute or two, wrap up on what you were telling us earlier.
Well, so what I've found from the schools, I have visited about 5 schools so far, and then we are told that the supplies, when they supply you 15 bags of, let's say, rice, then you only get 10 of them, and then you state on the sheet that you have received 15, and so it's making them underfeed the students. And the authorities have also been telling me that is increasing in the dormitories because the students are very hungry. They are not being fed like they used to. So in some occasions, some parents have had to order food to be given to their wards in some of these senior high schools. If you go to some of them, the parent association have agreed to pay some amount to cushion the school authorities in order to feed their children and feed them very well. So we have spoken to some parents whose wards are at Wesley Girls, and they are paying like 500 Ghana cedis to augment the feeding grants of the school. As in Fantipin, it's around 250, and they are using that to support the system in order for the children to be fed well. But even though the strike is still on, all the schools that I've visited, they've had to make some arrangement, special arrangement for the students to be fed. And so it is not the case that the students in the senior high schools here are not being fed. There is a special arrangement that is being done. And the authorities are telling me that the situation is dire because it is really making academic activities very, very difficult, because if students are being underfed, then the implications are very, very well known.
Right, Richard, we'll leave it here. Richard Kodunyaku joined us from the Central Region. And in wrapping up this conversation, I'm going back to Mr. Nyaba, who is with NAGRAT, and he will be telling us, Jacob Anaba, I beg your pardon, who is with NAGRAT. He will be telling us their response to the president's appeal for them to return to the classroom. And that will lead us to our next conversation on the cost of living allowance, because not only teachers are asking for, TUC is also demanding that. Ms. Anaba?
Yes.
The president says, please go back to the classrooms.
Thank you. In one of his State of Nation address, our president indicated that education was going to be his priority, and that the teacher was going to be the center. Now, the question I ask is, we were giving 4% base pay increase in 2021 and 7% in 2022. The living standard of the teacher, and for that matter, the Ghanaian worker, is deteriorating, and government is aware. We shouldn't have asked for an increment or COLA, cost of living allowance, but we did. And as a father, we made this passionate appeal to him on May the 1st May, that he should use his executive power to grant us COLA of 20%, the least that we could ask, looking at the inflationary rates of our country at the time, which was above 26%. So to we, what we want is to hear good news from our father, the president, and not this appeal, because when we go back to the classroom, we will not have that peace of mind to continue with the work that God has given us to do and for our nation to move forward. So we will rather appeal to him once more again that he should grant us this small concession we have asked, that he should use his executive power in giving us just 20% COLA.
Interesting. Responding to the president's appeal with an appeal. That's Jacob Anaba, Vice President of NAGRAT, ending this particular conversation. But coming up shortly, Benjamin will be having the conversation on the cost of living allowance. But this time around, not only focused on teachers, but other workers who belong to TUC. Do stay for that.
Thank you for staying with us on this holiday installment of the AM show. Now from, well, what we've been talking about, CHAS and feeding in our schools, very interesting conversation. Let's get on to talk about public sector workers and the Public Services Workers Union of the TUC, with a total of, note, over 27,000 workers threatening government, so to speak, on the back of a reluctance to heed the call for a cost of living allowance, which is going to further deepen the woes of government, as 4 teacher unions already have laid down their tools. Now, as stakeholders move into negotiation mode, how are things likely to unfold in the midst of an IMF bailout as far as our economy is concerned? What are the implications on governance and the economy? We're going to have an interaction this morning with the Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union, John Sampa. He joins me in the studio. We have labor expert Austin Game. We also have Dr. Akakpo, a CDD fellow. Join us with your thoughts. But do note, let me just add this. After we're done, the question we've posed on social media this morning, you can, catch up and share your reaction. What does the food shortage in our senior high schools mean for the survival of free SHS? You get to have your say on that when we return after this conversation. But let's stay on this conversation now. And once more, Mr. Sampa, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to our cherished listeners.
Okay. The good morning. Now, is it because of the situation? Is it because of the cola that hasn't come? Let me start from the standpoint of what Kunumayeding, as you've just mentioned, it means to you, particularly, and maybe to your members from what you've heard so far.
Okay, so we know that workers, we negotiated salary 1 year, but we negotiated 2 year salary, which was quite problematic to our members because they wanted us to wait to see what will happen in this year before we could have. But because of the current arrangement in negotiation, you need to negotiate ahead of the year so that it can be factored in the budget as well. But you know that after the negotiations, a lot of things have changed. And now inflation is so high. I mean, almost every week there is increase in fuel, and everything has also increased. And so the worker's salary is the only one that is not increased. We are not able to rent. We are not able to, some people have even parked their cars, and taxi drivers have increased, spare parts have increased, everything has increased. So when the workers say that all that it means is that whatever we have negotiated and whatever otherwise was able to take us to work income is no longer able to do so. And that is what we mean,
let me also check in on labor expert Austin Game. Mr. Game, are you with us? Right, I see you now. A very good morning to you, Mr. Game. A very good morning to Dr. Akakpo as well, CDD fellow. Good.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right. I do not think I get your audio feed, Mr. Game. If you could just unmute for me.
I have.
All right. Thank you.
I have. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So you've heard a bit of what Mr. Sampa has been saying in terms of the cost of living and how things are panning out. Mr. Sampa, so from an individual level, you've painted a picture for us. What has this meant for you since the last time there was any sort of increment in your living standards as members of the Public Services Workers Union? So the last time we had an increment of public sector wages, it was 7%. Before that, we had a 4% increment. And I mean, there are people like Professor Steve Hank who say that as of now, our inflationary rate could be hovering around something close to 50%, 48, 49%. In fact, some months back, and this is months ago, about 3 months ago, I engaged Professor Lord Mensah of the University of Ghana Business School, who painted the picture that for him, personally, at the time, inflation, when the government statistician was saying it was hovering around 17 plus 19 plus 21% thereabouts, he was seeing it at 60%. What is your reading in that regard before I move on to?
Okay, so we have realized that whatever official figures that the government, not only this government but successive government have issued out, whatever the projected inflationary rate is by Bank of Ghana, labor and those of us that really go to the market, it doesn't really gel. You don't.
It's not reflective.
It's not reflective, and so I also believe that the kind of inflation that is projected on record, sometimes when you go to the market, I mean, we all know how much we were buying cement, let's say a year ago, and currently how much we are buying it, how much we used to buy fuel, how much we buy now, how much we buy certain spare parts. Almost everything has doubled or is almost to the level of double. So sometimes you wonder what kind of formula is used to arrive at those kind of inflation.
As far as I know, the government, the Ghana Statistical Service has a basket of over 200 or so items that they use to, gauge the inflationary rate. But even if we're to stick by what they are making mention of, these are some of the highest we've seen in about 2 decades. So even that rate is quite on the high.
That is true. That is true. And that is why you could see that almost everybody is feeling the heat in the country. Workers are feeling the heat. Not only workers, but taxi drivers are not actually making money because people are not actually dropping anymore. And the general condition is that people are really suffering. And as workers, obviously, the only person we can go to is our employer, and to have a dialogue and to see what can be done. Also because...
In terms of what can be done, let me just hold you there briefly. Because look, we all know the times are hard, but you're not the only one feeling the pinch. I'm feeling the pinch. You are feeling the pinch. And guess what? Those in officialdom, authority, the same government you're going to, they are also feeling the pinch. And they are saying, look, our discretionary spending and others, we've cut them by 30%. You heard Mr. President during the Eid celebrations. We've cut them by 70%, 30%, I beg your pardon. When it comes to fuel that is dispensed to government officials and the rest, we've cut them by 50% and all of that. We're all tightening our belts. So to speak, why are you crying wolf?
Okay, so when the 4% and 7% was announced, almost the same meant it came up about the Article 71 office holders, their condition of service having been improved. I have some information, and so I know that it was not really improved on that year, but usually it is over the years that it increased.
Yes,
but it was announced.
Sometimes there is what we call back pay.
That is it. That is it.
Over time, then there is an incremental value.
Okay,
they are paid.
So you see what happened at that same time. Their increase came and it was so high. And if you already taken so much and already you have received so much increase, then obviously even if you cut 30%, you are still ahead.
It means nothing.
Really survive. Now, most of these people, their conditions are well taken care of. They have accommodation, they have everything. So sometimes somebody will say that even the salary that is paid that person, what does he really use it for? Because everything that you use your money for on the market is also provided some way, somehow for the person. So such a person, you cannot really use that one to gauge.
Is that a hypocritical stance then, to suggest that we should all tighten our belts because of the yawning differences?
Yes, I think so.
And feel it is hypocritical.
If we really want to tighten our belt, let us have a national dialogue. Let us have other strategies by which we can tighten our belt. Let us actually restructure how things are, because some of the systems, it has been there, it is man-made, and it has been there for many years. And if we are in hard times, I believe that when we sit down and we want to restructure how things are done in this country, we will be able to get somewhere. We'll be able to make some surpluses that we'll be able to use to pay even cost of living allowance and still be able to use it to do other things.
Mr. Sampa, before I get on to the other guests, and I just wanted to give you enough time to expatiate properly. So if you had the opportunity of suggesting that Article 71 office holders, or at least those at the helm of affairs, mainly the executive branch and some heads of CEOs and all of that, should take a further pay cut, do you think it would be a step in the right direction?
Well, these people, we talk always about Article 71 office holders, but from what I know, they don't constitute too large
a number.
The number. So,
but the draw, actually.
Yeah.
So the issue is they are a small number, but the draw on the public purse is huge. That is the difference.
Okay.
And there are many more public sector workers, but the draw, if you had to weigh, maybe 3% versus 97%, yet what the 3% may be getting and what the 97% are getting. That's how.
Okay, so on the personal level, I think that there are a number of things to be done. Now, there are a number of things apart from pay cut.
Right.
There are a lot of loopholes also in the system. Now, the pay that you see executives get is not the only things that they get. But in the office, you know that the system is such that people are able to maneuver to do so many things also in the public space. And I think that if we really want to save this economy, apart from pay cuts, we also have to actually check corruption and the loopholes in the system. We also have to check how people are benefiting from contract awards and all those kind of things. Chief executive in our companies, also the government itself, its size, its lifestyle, and how it does everything. And not this government alone, but successive government. If we are able to sit to have a conversation to restructure everything, perhaps the ordinary worker who is feeling the pinch will understand, because he has been part of the system. But the system that we have today is really unfair. So when people are talking, it's accumulation of many things that the people, the workers are talking about. And not only because they think that their salary is too small.
All right, do hold for me. I'll come back to you. But let me bring in labor expert Austin Game, who also joins the conversation. Mr. Game, the last time we interacted, you were bereaved. I'm hoping that God, bit by bit, is comforting you together with your family. Thank you once more for making the time to be with us. But let's talk labor issues. We're back at the same point. You know, we've had a number of conversations, and every time we come back to the same point. Threats of this or that, you know, industrial actions here and there, especially because of the cost of living. We're back to square one. And the question is, any surprises in here that we have the teachers' unions? They have had, in fact, tomorrow there are going to be further interactions. The National Labour Commission has had to step in. But now we have the Public Services Workers Union, who are also saying, pay us COLA, else things will not go well. And we're talking 27,000 people. Any surprises in there?
Thank you. I appreciate your earlier comment. To be very honest with you, we've gotten to a junction that we have to be very careful as a people and as a nation. The past, anything good in the past, let's bring it up here now. Anything that is of no help, let's leave it there. In the past, when we had a similar situation, but not this gargantuan level of inflation and related matters, the employer, government then, quickly organized a national and comprehensive national dialogue at home, and almost all the unions were present, and other players were all present. I was there myself. We had a very open-ended type of conversation based on our labor law, because the law enjoins the employer to have an open dialogue with his own workers when you have matters of this nature. To the extent that it's also it also opens that if you have a situation like this, go carry the economic situation and the welfare of the people under section, I believe, 113 subsection C. The importance of it should be openly discussed, and you arrive at a decision that will satisfy both of you. This is a lot more heavier a burden than that of 2015. Yet that was what they did. So it's getting a little too late, but I'm happy they're opening up for a dialogue maybe on Tuesday, just tomorrow. I wonder the format, but now that the Labour Commission has been maybe put in place, they may offer some help, because I know my friends who are there have the level of capacity to be able to guide the conversation. If they can do that well, fine. Otherwise, we are heading for some trouble.
You say we're heading for some trouble, and it's interesting because in one breath you say it's a little too late, and in another breath you say we're heading for trouble. That cannot bode well. How exactly do you mean? Because look, like it or not, Mr. Game, I'm sure you're familiar with our labor situation in the country, and every now and then there will be issues. It's also dependent on government and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, how the National Labor Commission engages, unions and all of that. But these will happen from time to time. So when you put these two together, I get worried. What do you mean?
If you have a twine and it's intertwined so badly in a manner that you have to unwind it, it takes a lot of dexterity and skill to be able to unwind it. At the moment, we have the twine really in shambles, and unwinding it requires this kind of skill, expert skills to do it. So it's not a question of the employer government alone. It's not even a case of Labour Commission alone. That's why perhaps you are doing what you are doing now. If we can be open and honest and have this conversation, which defines the quality of the relationship between the parties. And we all know that the kind of relationship that exists today is not the best. So, too late because proactivity as enshrined in the Labour Act has not been taken into consideration. We are supposed to be proactive in managing labor relation matters.
Is that to suggest we've been reactive thus far?
Precisely. We have to prevent the reactivity going forward. Never should it occur again. To whoever comes to head this country tomorrow, they should be aware that proactivity has not been placed in the Labour Act to occupy space. It's intended to be used and used properly.
But Mr. Game, sorry to keep interjecting or intervening. You say whoever takes over power tomorrow, but we have leadership now. So I guess we should start solving the problem from now.
Yeah, so I'm warning ahead that today we have government in place. They have just invited our colleagues to be at the table. I'll plead with my colleagues that they should take it easy because this is our country. I concede that it will be a very tough business for government, even if they give 1%, it will lead us to another inflationary bracket. If they give 2%, it will lead us to another inflationary bracket, let alone 20%. So what else could they do? What is it that if they don't do will be risky for us? What is it that if they do will be risky? They should open up for the conversation, not argument and debate, because somebody will lose the debate, somebody will win the debate. We don't need argument now. All we need is a simple, civilized conversation around the table for a consensus to be reached. At the end of the day, everybody would have been happy for participating in the conversation. Otherwise, maybe some strange thing will happen.
Let me just sneak in this bit, and it's the starting question I'll throw to Dr. Akakpo. But Doc, just hold for me. Mr. Game, I wanted to run this by you because of the tail end of the submission you just made. At the Eid al-Adha celebrations, the president said, and I quote, the current economic challenges are on a global scale. So I'm paraphrasing, actually. The current economic challenges are on a global scale, which have affected many countries. But I'm giving the assurance that government is leaving no stone unturned in terms of resolving these challenges. When you weigh the global economic crises that we have to deal with, COVID-19 on one hand, the Russo-Ukrainian endeavor on the other, can anything really be done about the situation? I mean, you can call for it, but the reality is, can government meet it at all?
If I were to be chairing this meeting, a lot of techniques will have to be deployed. In reality, a 20% or even 10% COLA given to the workers would mean some 2 years problem.
2 years problem. Wow.
Yes, because it will carry us into other inflationary. Look, 1% to the public sector is a major concern. So let alone 10, 15, or 20. Whichever way it is, it will be a problem. But is there anything else that could be done? Yes, I think so. We have taxes. We have tax thresholds. The PAYE can be adjusted. We will not borrow money to pay that. As for COLA, you have to borrow money to pay. And you have to pay interest on whatever you borrow. The consequences are there. But the PAYE, or if we remove some of the taxes that are becoming problematic for us and put money directly into the pocket of each and everyone, indeed, even the private sector people, including my workers that I have, I can guarantee you they are all going to the same market with the public sector workers. So everybody needs some cushioning. And so if the tax threshold can be lifted, we should suffer some 3, 4, 5 maximum percent, it will not borrow money to do that. And we may suffer a hitch a little bit. But if it's COLA, I have negotiated COLA before when I was a union leader.
Right.
And we were giving that COLA. The consequences at the time is different from the consequences today. And so we have to go gingerly and put all the alternatives on the table. Let them have a conversation around it.
Okay.
And because we have given tax threshold, we have lifted the tax threshold before and giving workers that aspect of it instead of giving money directly by borrowing it and paying. It is problematic, to be very honest with you. That's why I said the twine have been really mangled. And to unwind it calls for some dexterity and skill to be able to do that.
Do you feel the system, do you feel the system, just give me a yes or no answer, do you feel the system has the dexterity required to unravel this twine?
Not in its entirety, but we are many. If many people can be invited into the same room under lock and key for some 2-3 hours, we should be able to do it.
Okay. All right.
We shouldn't limit it to just some 10 people.
Let me bring in Dr. Osai Kwapong, and thank you so much for your patience, sir. I just wanted to lay the basis for the conversation from there. But on the back of what Mr. President said at the Eid celebrations, we're in dire economic times. And when you look at the impact this could have on governance generally, the economy in a bit of turmoil, we're going to the IMF. That is, if they even admit us. What does this mean for governance generally?
Well, it goes to show you that certain problems sometimes persist much longer than we think. Some problems sometimes become a little more intractable than we imagine. Like Mr. Austin Gami said, that whatever is resolved today may be a short-term resolution, but there are also other long-term issues that should a different government be in place, give it another 2-3 years, you may have some of these issues crop up again. So for me, then the key governance challenge is how do you resolve some of these things with a certain permanency, so that at least you know that within another 5 years you can calm some of these storms around labor agitation. On the other hand, though, there are things that you never also anticipate, right? situations happen that you may have no control over. Unexpected things may happen. And when those things happen, it sort of jolts you where you have to reposition yourself to deal with some of these issues. And in this particular case, the labor agitations, which tend to come up every so often. And most of the time, it really boils down to our public sectors and a wage that allows them to live comfortably, quote unquote, even in dire times, right? That what measures do you put in place to insulate your public sector workers should something in the economy jolt them in such a way that they also begin to face economic hardships and economic challenges just like everyone else. Again, like Mr. Austin said, his private sector workers go to the same market as the public sector workers. And so what sort of purchasing power are these two types of workers going to the market with? And that becomes the governance challenge that some way, somehow, like he said, if you can have an open, transparent dialogue about it, acknowledge the realities, acknowledge the challenges, and then some way, somehow find some workable compromise. Because I mean, given the times in which we are, I can see a sort of adversarial, atmosphere, clouding this conversation and this engagement. But it is also not the time for that sort of adversarial, creation of an adversarial atmosphere because of the circumstances surrounding the demands and the ability or inability of government to resolve some of these things. But that really is the intractable governance challenge that we face, that we have to find a way to deal with it.
There's this message that comes through from Papania J, who says, cancel the ex gratia and spread the differences to all government workers, not only to the politicians. You say the so-called Article 71. I can't add the word you use, but that's the suggestion there. And I was just sharing with Mr. Sampa that when you look at the quantum of what we give our Article 71 holders, so just a few, but so much compared to even the large masses of public sector workers. And now, in addition to the teachers, we have the Public Services Workers Union. So this is a thought that is shared. There's also Mr. Sampa himself, who has said, as you can read on your screens, that in terms of the cost of living allowance, apart from pay cuts and all of that, we must also stem the tide of corruption. How much of a factor is that, do you see, Dr. Akakpo?
So if you think about this whole issue around Article 71 office holders, right, and if you look at some of the committee reports and you see the disparity between the changes over time in how much they are giving versus how much the public sector worker earns, you can see the issues of inequity emerging. And so when you put on the table the question of shared sacrifices, I think you have to balance that call for shared sacrifices, right? In the sense that if one side would have to even tighten their belts much further, I think those making the demands, labor would also have to see that the other side of the equation is also making some real meaningful sacrifices.
Should government officials, Article 71 office holders, be made to tighten their belts further? At the Eid, we're told by Mr. President that they have suffered 30% pay cuts, but people are also asking, what is 30% of what? 40,000 plus? If you halve your fuel coupons or benefits by 50%, that could be the equivalent of a poor school teacher's entire salary for a month. So could they go further?
I believe so, but I think I was very intrigued by one of the suggestions that Mr. Game put on the table, which is, can you do something about the pay as you earn, right? Something that won't put, well, should I say, if you were weighing the two options, going to borrow, paying interest on it to meet some of these demands versus suffering a little bit of a revenue loss because you either increase the threshold at which pay starts to kick in. I think that is one idea worthy of pursuing. But you're right. In the times in which we are, the sacrifices would have to be deep, right? And not just the sacrifices, the sacrifices on those who are perceived to be the ones really, quote unquote, benefiting from the system. Those perceptions, perception may not be reality, but sometimes perceptions are also reality. And so there has to be those very strong signals that are sent to say that, look, for example, even us as Article 71 holders, we are also making some deep sacrifices. I think in an atmosphere like that, you reduce the angst on the side of labor and the demands that you're making. If you say, look, we won't be able to meet your full demands, they have to be able to see on the government side that, okay, we are seeing that you are making some good faith efforts, and therefore we are also willing to temper our agitations and demands a little bit. But if those deep sacrifices are not seen on the side of the policymakers, Article 71 holders, etc., it becomes very difficult to ask others to make those sacrifices. I mean,
in other words,
if they have to be shared, they have to be shared very deeply.
Okay, leadership by example. Let me just have you make this final point before I come to Mr. Sampa in the studio, and then we'll start, winding down on the conversation. I'm sure you followed what has happened, how the cookie has crumbled in Sri Lanka. President Rajapaksa, and it's been a Pasca situation in Sri Lanka, hasn't it? So he had to flee with his tail between his legs. Leaders or people, ordinary people in that country, are calling for the Prime Minister to also exit. In fact, when you look at page 6 of the Ghanaian Times newspaper today, it says protesters will occupy palace until leaders go. We've seen some footage from the BBC showing, Rajapaksa leaving the country. I found it of interest that all the V8s and all of that were still at the presidential palace, and it made for interesting watching. Why am I talking about this? At the tail end of that BBC report, the reporter says, look, this is a lesson for all leaders across the world. We have our fair share of the Sri Lankan situation. Fuel prices, inflation of food products, poor salaries and salaries not coming, and cost of living and all of that. From the governance perspective, what do you see and what should we be doing? I'm not a doomsayer or doomsday or naysayer, but how do we avoid getting there?
We avoid getting there by being very proactive. So, for example, labor has made its demands. Some teachers have laid down their tools, things like that. But I think we avoid some of these things by recognizing the economic challenges that people are facing. And again, we always say that governance is both an art and a science. The science part of governance is being able to discuss in very transparent ways the economic realities that we face, the fiscal realities that government is facing. The art part is how you are able to manage group interests, how you are able to manage group agitations, how you are able to temper that to make them say that we are willing to either sacrifice, to hold off a little bit, to come up with some reasonable compromises. And I think for me, in situations like this, it behoves on government to send those very strong signals that we understand, we are listening, and even if they won't be able to do the 20%, you have to find artistic ways of communicating why you won't be able to, why you won't be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, the things that, I can say the same thing to one person, the reaction will be very different. Someone would say the same thing and the reaction will be very different. But for me, I think a recognition of the times in which we are and a willingness to fully engage and find common solutions is very critical at this stage, because we have a governance system to protect. We have a democratic system to protect. And I think we are at the point where, as I always say, we've made our peace with democracy. But there are things that challenges that peace, like some of these economic challenges. And again, being proactive and being very honest about it is what would get us to a point of, everybody going home, even if you don't get all that you came to the table to demand for, that at least you feel a certain sense of satisfaction and relief, knowing that if things get better, those, the gains will be shared.
Okay. Let me come to Mr. Sampa, who has, been waiting with bated breath. So, Mosadei, Kroma Eshe.
Yeah.
Kroma Eshe pa. The temperature hot, eh?
Yeah, our members are not. It is not that easy, It is very difficult to be a labor leader at this time.
How difficult is it?
It's very difficult because.
Tell me what pinch you're feeling.
At one breath, there are a lot of dimensions to whatever we are going on in the country now. The country is in hard times. There's a hint to go to IMF. Whether the picture that is painted is correct or not, our members do not necessarily believe all these. Also,
when you say your members do not necessarily believe all these, what do you mean?
Okay, so what I mean is that, when you go to the negotiation table, there are a lot of information that are made available to you.
Right.
And whether the information made available by those that manage the country, whether the people believe it.
So the data that is there, I mean, initially you were even questioning some of the figures we see when it comes to inflation, whether it's a true reflection of what we...
That is it.
So those are the problems.
So now, at one point, you are at a meeting with all stakeholders and you want to be reasonable, but at one point, your people sometimes do not see. Because as a country, I believe that where we are heading towards, we need to bring people with the skills, and we need to even change certain priorities that we have as a country. Indeed, just one metric, just one priority change could actually solve the money that we really need from IMF to bail us. But
like what?
Okay. When labor meets, it's very difficult sometimes to talk about some of these things because you don't really want to sound political.
You have the platform, talk about it.
But the truth is that if indeed the country is collapsing, and you and I sitting here can pay, let's say, 1,000 cedis for a term for school fees at the secondary school level, why should it be free?
Right, so we basically need to reprioritize when it comes to some of our flagship programs.
Or maybe we need to modify it a little bit.
And in this case, you are talking about free SHS because now we are even struggling with some of the institutions, like you heard.
And the truth is that we are destroying the institutions also because now even the money to take care of our students are not even there. And so at the end of it, before we realize, people are pushed to go to private secondary school, which is even more expensive. So the point is that we can. Now, why should we spend so much money to put National Cathedral when we could perhaps wait it a little bit? So when workers are seeing all these, and you say that there is no money, then there isn't, it may not be true, but if really the economy is collapsing, we need to change priorities. We need to sit and know that something that we want to do today, maybe we can do it tomorrow. I believe when we meet to look at all these, it is possible for us to get something. And Ostengami is a very experienced person. He makes very useful input about the taxes we pay even as workers here and there. And in fact, it is good also because it will even reflect even people, not only the people in the public sector, and that is very good. But what will it lead? It will lead to the same thing. We are looking for money in our pocket or a little bit of cushioning. So depending on the percentage that you will actually cut the taxes, it may mean 20%. And for me, even if we can do something so that it will not be only for public sector workers, but also private sector workers that are contributing to this economy also is cushioning a little bit, why not? But we can't do all the negotiation here. I believe that if government have been quite proactive since May, and we made this demand.
So you agree with Ostengame that government has not been proactive?
Completely. I mean, even when workers kept saying that we needed response. Even after that, when the Secretary General wrote on behalf of organized labor about 2 months ago, even for response, we have not even received official response. It is only when workers threaten to go on strike or when the strike action starts before you will see invitation. Why the Public Services Workers Union? We have 65 public sector institutions, very critical public sector institutions, and we hardly actually declare strike or threaten strike.
It's been a while since I heard of you coming out.
And
so I was a bit surprised.
And sometimes even our members wonder why we don't actually strike. But we use dialogue, we use lobbying, and sometimes we get what we want, or we meet ourselves halfway. But when you see that the entire 65 public sector institutions, including electoral commission,
you are 27,000 strong, right?
No, 27,000 strong, and 65 different public sector institutions. You can imagine what it actually means is that our people, our members are pushing us that we have to take the action. And we have gotten to a point where if we don't take any action, we destroy ourselves even as a union. So I strongly believe that when we sit and we give attention, on the Friday when we had a meeting, at dawn, when we have given notice and we have brought people from all over the country, at dawn around 3 a.m., then my General Secretary informed me that he has received invitation for us to attend organized labor meeting.
You're telling me that invitation came at dawn?
Yes, at dawn. How will you
at 3 a.m.
even your people? So sometimes it looks as if
where did this invitation come from? The National Labor Commission?
It came from the Ministry of Employment
and Labor
also fair wages. Right. You know, sometimes how this institution works, and sometimes I don't begrudge them, especially fair wages. Fair wages is not really allowed to operate very well.
Fair Wages and Salaries Commission is not allowed to operate well. How do you mean?
What I mean is that, okay, they need resources to be able to organize themselves. Labor Commission need resources. Go to Labor Commission. Their situation is pathetic. They are even part of the PSWU. And you will see that the resources are not even there. Sometimes even to organize a meeting at fair wages, even a good conference room that can take even 20 people. Labor unions we have in this country are more than 20. If two people are coming, always they have to go and hire a place to go and do even a meeting. All because the managers of the country do not pay much attention to labor institutions, so that we will put mechanism in place not to get to where we have gotten to now. So I think that we are a little bit late, but it's not too late. I believe that when government comes sincerely and committed and not trying to deceive workers again, before you realize, let us do this, we accept something, and then you will hear that they are now going to use money to do this, going to use money to, then our members will think that we have.
So you feel sometimes it is just circumlocution, if you like, to deceive you.
That is it. But we are getting to a point where the workers are now becoming a little more intelligent, and now we will get to a point that you keep on deceiving the people, and now you get to a place where you will never have your peace, because all the unions, the teacher union, the civil service, the entire public service, then of course we are bringing
everyone will be on your neck,
and that is very bad. But I think that we have to be sincere with some of these discussions.
All right, so gentlemen, I want us to look at the way forward, and I'm going to be addressing this to all three of you, so we move the conversation forward. Do you know what is interesting from all that you've said? Quite a number of interesting things, but one thing you mentioned that, so the National Labor Commission itself, of course, is part of the Public Services Workers Union, yes. So technically they are also agitating.
Yes, once we give notice and our demands are not met, or there's no consensus, when we declare strike action, the National Labor Commission workers are part of it. Of course, the management, the executive secretary, and the commissioners are not part. But our workers over there will not even open the doors for them to go to the office.
Wow. What an interesting dynamic to this conversation. So let's wrap the conversation on the way forward. What is the way forward? The Fair Wages and Salaries Commission is meeting organized labor tomorrow. What are your expectations as far as that? Because it's on the same matter of COLA, cost of living allowance.
We are looking forward to see a very serious government team. Sometimes when you go and meet the people that are coming to negotiate with you, you realize that people are not too serious. Well, the labor minister is always there because that is his job. We are dealing with Minister of Finance, and sometimes nobody comes. or sometimes they send somebody who may not have enough capacity. The truth is that when you meet the team and all they do is that they are appealing, please go home, please call up the strike. They don't come with anything. They come only with appeal. And when it happens like that, of course, and that is why we are not going to withdraw our notice, so that we will satisfy the requirement of 7 days notice. Because we believe that these people will come again empty-handed, and they will come only to say, we are pleading with you, don't.
I mean, Mr. President started with the appeal at the Eid celebrations. He says, look,
No. He should send his
withdraw
team.
your services.
Like the way he's composing a team to meet the IMF, he should compose a very strong team to make labor, and they must come with ideas. Austin Gami make useful suggestions. Dr. Sai also makes very important information. These are just two people that you are talking to. What it means that we have more people that can even contribute. So we have a lot of people that government can consult. Apart from that, when they are coming, we should see that government is seeing this as a crisis, and it has composed competent, strong team that have capacity to make commitment on behalf of government. When you see that, obviously you may give attention to it. But when they come with appeal, I strongly believe that appeal, because they have already appealed to the teacher unions and they have not accepted that.
If I asked you what your confidence level is on a scale of 1 to 10, that these engagements will amount to much, what would you say on a scale of 1 to 10? What is your confidence level?
Wow, it's 50-50.
50-50?
5, yeah.
All right. Any top-up words before I move on?
Okay, so what I would say to my members is that we are very committed, we are very reasonable people. We will meet government tomorrow, and we'll be very forthright with the issues. When government comes with something that worth consideration, our members should know that we are in this country together and we must save the country. But if government come with plea saying that we should go home, they should actually be ready, because coming 7 days, which is 19, we will actually embark on unprecedented industrial action in Ghana.
The words of Mr. Sampa, who is Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union. Let me bring in Austin Game and Dr. Osai Kwapong for their final takes. So, Austin, you've been there, done that, and it doesn't look like you said there's a storm brewing. Does it look like this storm will be weathered? And what would you like to see in these deliberations that start from tomorrow? Hello, Mr. Game?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Right, thank you. I think that, to be honest with you, the workers hold a simple belief that they do not trust the employer. And where there is no trust, they will operate in the red zone, where they will either be on strike or walk away from meetings or refuse to talk. 3 things, one of them will happen no matter what. And it's very important at this point in time that they all go to the meeting with an open mind. And the employer is enjoined by our Labor Act that under Section 9, to have an open conversation with the workers who are their own employees. To enable them to come to a consensus, they have to brainstorm on all alternatives at the table, generate various options, because otherwise the employer will take a position, the union will take a position, they will drag the nation into the oblivion. To prevent that, when they have the brainstorming session, that's why the meeting, and I have a lot of respect and confidence in my friend and brother Ignatius Bafo, who is the Minister for Employment and Labor Relations. He needs support from the Ministry of Finance. I concede that they have meetings with the IMF, but I guarantee you, at this point in time, even this matter is more important than going to have a meeting with the IMF. Because at the back of it, you can't resolve anything. And the consequences will be dire for all of us than if they send a strong team of either the minister himself, and they must go, everybody must go with humility. No need for any ego to operate there. no need for pride. It's about Ghana and Ghana alone, so that they can have an open-ended conversation, generate all the options, and satisfy themselves that we will get nothing, but we are satisfied and we'll be able to explain to our members, or we'll get maybe the tax threshold lifted, or government will have to give undertaking that they have to stop some 2 major flagship programs.
Right.
Albeit we have people who are very poor in this country, they cannot afford to pay school fees. So let's do targeting and get some people to enable school fees to be paid for them. The rest of the people, like the Minister of Finance one time said, he can afford to pay school fee for his children. Let people like your good self and my friend John and Sampa can afford to pay school fees. And then I've taken myself out because I am not going to have a child now. So I think it's important for us to bear in mind that. And then Agenda 111 is a good thing, but it's not, we have sufficient things in the country for now. Let's rather pump money into those areas to be able to service, you know, those areas and take care of our people.
So for now, we should put Agenda 111 on ice. We should hold on and focus on other things.
Yeah, and target the free SHS. And when I was in school, my parents used to, you know, feed us. Saturdays and Sundays, parents feed their children. So let's think about all this and then reduce the numbers of some of the appointees. If there are too many, they should reduce some. Then organized labor will see that some action has been taken. They will suspend their demands or do otherwise, give something, you know, other than the action they want to take. So let's be very, very, very active in this conversation and not limit it to we can't give anything.
Okay.
And we'll take this to create a problem for all of us.
All right. So giving you the final bite, Dr. Akakpo, some of the things we've heard, halt or put a freeze on Agenda 111. For those who can pay for free SHS, let them pay. Scrap the National Cathedral for now. It's not relevant. I mean, all these ideas have been shared by Mr. Sampa and Austin Game. What are your proposals moving into tomorrow's deliberations? What are you hoping to see in about a minute? Hello, Dr. Akakpo.
One of the things that Mr. Sampa talked about is the issue of trust and the history of negotiations with government, where the team they bring in sometimes doesn't signal seriousness, or we take your concerns very seriously. Even sometimes they may agree on something and then a day or two later they renege, or they don't even fulfill that promise. So both sides are going in with a history that suggests to one side that there are trust issues there, confidence is not also that very high. But government is also going in on the back of very difficult economic times. I'm hoping that, as Mr. Sampa said, let government bring in a very strong team that signals to labor that we take your concerns very seriously. We really want to negotiate in good faith. Because at the end of the day, whatever the leaders of the union also agree on, they have to turn around and sell it to their members. And that's not that's not an easy task for them to do. So again, I am hoping that negotiations will be done in an environment of trust, in an environment of transparency, and whatever both sides commit to, especially government, that they would not renege on that. Because just listening to Mr. Sampa and the sheer numbers and the number of public sector institutions, I don't think we want to see a situation where our public sector grinds to a halt because of the key things that they do on a daily basis to keep the economy moving, to keep society running.
Right. It's been really interesting engaging all of you gentlemen, and we're immensely grateful that you took the time to join us. Dr. Osai Kwapong is a CDD fellow. We also had Austin Game, a labor expert, and Mr. John Sampa, Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union. Gentlemen, thank you and do have a good day. To you in the studio, Mr. Sampa, we can only wish you the very best. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just hold for me. And when we return on the show, we'll take a bit of a breather. When we return, it's all about you. You've heard the conversations from these schools struggling to survive as far as free SHS is concerned. The buffer stock company, underweight provisions given them. We heard from the likes of Dr. Clement Apakpo, who's talking about long-standing issues. Very interesting conversation. Our question to you is, what does this mean for the survival of free SHS? And some people have even spoken about it on the back of the labor agitations that, look, we ought to really prioritize. Do get interactive with your messages. We'll read them. And you can call this line right after the break. 0302-211-691, extension 2. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Time for you to have your say right here on the show. Let's not waste any time, shall we? But welcome, Bernice. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. That was an interesting conversation you had.
Oh, yours was as well.
Tackle the issue from all the angles. So remember, during my conversation with Mr. Kwarting, PRO of the Education Ministry, I mentioned about some schools having to sell bread. Well, I've received more information on why the bread was sold. It's interesting. So I'm told that the Accra Girls was hosting a national cadet program, and the school was told that it will be receiving 600 students. So it prepared for 600 students, but only 300 of them showed up. So there was a backlog. So what happens to the extra bread? And
so there's a backlog of 300.
Yes, and so they had to sell the bread to the students so it doesn't go waste. In any case, due to the issues we discussed, the students were taking porridge without bread anyway. And so that's how come bread was sold to the students. Okay. But the thing is, I'm not sure this explanation was given to the students. So they thought it was going to continue. I mean, so based on my source, it was like, oh, now we buy bread. And so it was the hope that it will continue. Sorry to disappoint the students. This is not going to continue, but that's why you had to buy the bread. So if you didn't have the explanation, I've given it to you. But we have our first caller. Hello, Foster.
Hello.
Hello, let's hear you, sir.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please, my concern I want to raise here is not biased anyway, but it's actually eating up into our life, especially with the teachers. The cost of living allowance. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are in the village or you are in the city. Everything is so expensive. And how can we survive? How can we make life out of this? But, for them to convince us, the government to convince us that what is happening now is a hardship that all of us must, bear with, is what? One thing they must do is that they must also cut down their costs.
Okay.
The way they go about enjoying some of the state privileges, it must come down. They must pay their own fuel. They must pay for their own fuel and other things. Then we know that all of us, we are going through hardship. And now whatever they will say, we can accept it. Currently, they said they are issuing lancing. And if you are in-service teacher, you shall be issued a lancing. But those of us who had education after 2019 and still in the system, they were denied. And we don't know the way forward. So everybody is confused. In fact, so they actually have to come down and then talk to us and make things right.
Right, Foster, thank you very much. Sorry, your point is well noted. We'll have to pick other callers. Isa from Tamale, good morning. Let's hear you.
Good morning.
Yes, please make your points real snappy so we can take other callers.
Yeah, I have some two recommendations for the country. First of all, I believe that slashing down the salary of 71 office holders, state-owned enterprises, we don't need entities at the state-owned enterprises. These are waste. on the public ministers. We have regional ministers without deputies. Can't we do the same for our ministers? For instance, a great minister, that's it. One person can handle the ministry. So let's do away with these things. These problems are created by Akakpo, and he has created them, and he ought to fix it.
Right. Thank you very much for calling. Yes, Isa, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us here on the AM show. Hello, Ghana. Happy moment is here. Let's storm World Cup Qatar 2022 with Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water from Akakpo Company Limited. Simply buy your favorite Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water and text a 4-digit unique number on the neck of the bottle to short code *780# option 2. *780# option 2. And follow the prompts on all networks for free. Be one of the lucky winners to this year's World Cup in the monthly draw. You can also win TVs, fridges, microwave ovens, mobile phones, home theaters, free drinks, and more instantly. Please don't waste any time. Grab a bottle of Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water, and let's storm Qatar this World Cup. This promotion is on the NLA Caritas platform, and this advert is FDA approved. Terms and conditions apply. And also, so you know, a person who is not required to register for VAT may voluntarily apply to be registered. A voluntary applicant shall be registered as a taxable person where the Commissioner General is satisfied that the person has a fixed place of abode or business, or reasonably believes the person keeps proper accounting records related to any business activity carried on by that person, submits regular and reliable tax returns, or reasonably believes that the person is fit and proper to be registered. Let's make a few more calls as we wrap up this edition of the AM show. Francis from Kumasi. Hello, Francis. Let's hear you quickly, please.
Hello, Francis.
As labor teacher, that sometimes when we go for government negotiation, they try to negotiate. I think last year it was 4% and 7%. What we know is government raises appointees, yes. Good morning.
Do we have anyone on apart from Francis? If there's someone else, let's listen to Francis for now. Francis,
Hello,
go ahead.
I wanted to add a point to what the discussion this morning. You know, we are on strike because government is trying to deceive us. One government said you want to give us 4% and 7% as an increment, but lo and behold, government started to raise the appointees for positions to 50-something and 30-something percent. So our salary still is being consumed by even the inflation. And there is no much to survive on it. That's why we are still on the strike.
All right, Francis.
So government should do something about it.
Sure. Thank you very much for calling in, Benjamin. And that will be our last and final call on the show this morning. Well, I was having a conversation with one of our colleagues who said he believes that we'll have to brace ourselves for tougher times. Well, we've been told that.
Look, the writing is on the wall. Even before we started hinting towards going to the IMF, I had been interacting with economists, both on the show and off the show, people who know the economic and the financial space. And they were already warning that we had to put certain measures in place because where we're inching towards, it would mean that 2023 and 2024 could be tougher years. Now that we're heading for an IMF program and with all the problems we have, we really need to pray for Ghana and also work to support the system because
definitely
these are not
reminds me of
ordinary times.
Of the sermon I heard on Sunday, which was just yesterday. It was pray and build. Okay, and it was focused on the book of Nehemiah, where you realize that the Israelites
were building efforts,
both praying and building. So there needs to be a balance of the two. And that was a sermon I heard.
Where's Samuel Kojo brace? Let's brace ourselves for...
Well, on that note, we end this edition of the AM show. It's been a pleasure coming your way, and we'll just have to say Barkade Salah to those of you who are celebrating Eid al-Adha. Yeah, Barkade. And it's been a good one here for us, and we hope it has been for you this morning. Thank you for joining us. Coming up next, Aisha Ibrahim brings you News Desk. Do stay with us here on the Joy News channel. But for now, from Benjamin and myself, it's enjoy the rest of your day and take care.